I'm trying to get going here. We're trying to get it going. I think we're good to go, unless we're not. But I think we're good to go. Everything looks good on my end.
We're
so
not? I mean, you're saying it with confidence.
No, yeah, I think we're good. Are we not good?
Oh, we're not good. What?
Casey's opening the door like we're not good.
Casey, come on in. We're trying new stuff today. We're trying to get some stuff.
No, I got a thumbs up. We're good to go. So I don't know what the issue was there, but we're off and running.
5 Hour Energy. This is my best friend. No free ads, but I don't care. This is the only way I can get through the day. I don't know what your coping mechanism is throughout the day when you're constantly on the run. But this 5 Hour Energy, let's see what flavor we got today. I think this is the apple one. Yeah, this is the sour apple 5 Hour Energy. It's my go-to energy drink of choice, if you will.
That's good. I've never had a 5 Hour Energy, but I'm a coffee guy.
Oh, I'm a coffee guy too, but do you is it all black coffee?
All black coffee all day. Let me get you shooting that 5 Hour Energy for all the fans there. I'm a black coffee guy all the way through. Two, 3 black coffees throughout the day, and I'm usually good to go.
So I saw you worked over the weekend because there was some news that came out over the weekend. I think it caught a lot of fans by surprise, Bengals fans, that is, and NFL fans in general, AFC North fans. May not be, I don't think, as a Browns fan, I'm not a fan of it, but I'm keeping an eye on what's going on in Cincinnati, just like anything that happens in Cleveland. You as Bengals fans keeping an eye on what's going on there, as is in Pittsburgh and in Baltimore. And, I mean, hell, really, the NFL with parity across the league, everyone's keeping an eye on what's going on. I mean, a year ago at this time, no one cared what was happening in Houston. No one cared what was going on with the Houston Texans, but now I don't know about you, but even as a Browns fan, I'm like, what the Texans do?
Absolutely.
They get Stephon Diggs. Oh, they have Dell. Oh, they have a quarterback heading into year 2, and so they have a lot of cap flexibility over the next couple years. And we're keeping an eye on the Texans. There's a lot of teams that we're keeping an eye on, and that team has been the Bengals the last couple of years for non-Bengals fans even. I've said that the Houston Texans have a chance to be the next Cincinnati Bengals team that kind of rises up and just takes off once they finally get that quarterback right, and that's basically what's happened in Houston. It's what's happened in Cincinnati. But they're on the back half now. They're past the back half. They are on the second wave now of capitalizing on the great draft picks, capitalizing on the fact that you got your Joe Burrow, you got your Jamar Chases, your T. Higgins. You drafted well on both sides of the ball. But now the next stage is being able to retain some of that. And we've seen the growing pains a little bit with Cincinnati as they try to find a way to kind of keep this train going a little bit. And although T. Higgins may not be a part of long-term plans, he's definitely a part of the big picture plans for this season coming up, no doubt about it. For them to be a Super Bowl contender, they need T. Higgins. T. Higgins, they need him out there. He needs to be out there because there's a lot that he's trying to accomplish as well.
Right.
He wants to get paid. He needs to be out there. We weren't sure exactly what to expect. We didn't really know what was going to happen with how long he was going to hold out. I always thought it was silly, for him to hold out, mainly because of the fact that I never truly thought, that it was a situation where he had anything to gain from sitting out. Because I've said before that the Cincinnati Bengals, they've kind of made up in their mind that he is not a part of their long-term plans. There's a reason that they hadn't had any kind of contact with him in over a year, and I've defended the Bengals in that, saying, well, there's no point in having contact with him if there's not going to be a long-term plan in place as far as him being a part of the Cincinnati Bengals. The only thing that they need to talk about, the only thing that they need to discuss is, well, what can we do to maximize his talent, whether it be on this roster or off? Does he have more value to the team off the roster as far as being traded and acquiring draft capital and being able to kind of load up, kind of like what the Kansas City Chiefs did with Tyreek Hill? Or is this a situation where he has more value to you on the roster, you give up that draft capital, and you go all in for one more season? Well, the Cincinnati Bengals went all in for one more season. T. Higgins not happy, demanded a trade. He sat out of mandatory minicamp and voluntary minicamp, and we weren't sure how long this was going to last. I have to say, though, I was a little shocked that over the weekend, out of nowhere, bang, the news breaks. Adam Schefter, everyone else jumping in on it. I know that's your guy. You a big Adam Schefter fan? I hear you guys taking shots at all Shefty.
I can't stand Shefty, and he had to have had a terrible weekend with Jamar here for voluntary minicamp and now T signing his franchise tag. I think he swore he wasn't going to sign. And I don't know if you saw Adam Schefter's official tweet about the signing. He scrolled all the way back to T wearing number 85 with a big old frown on his face. Couldn't use any smiling pictures of T from the last year or so of him enjoying his time in Cincinnati. He went and frowned a nice flick of a disgruntled T. Higgins. So he still got his little joy from a good news for the Bengals. And yeah, I mean, we talked about it on Wednesday and Friday last week. T. Higgins was always going to sign this extension. It's $22 million to play for a Super Bowl contender. There was no way that he wasn't going to sign it, and he did. And he signed it a lot earlier than we think. And whenever there's a trade request from a star player of your team, obviously I'm a Bengals fan, and you like to think that it's the agent pushing those buttons and not the player. You like to think that, David Mulligetta has his hands in on the whole thing, and he's pulling the strings of T. Higgins in the offseason to try to maximize his value. And with a move like this, T. Higgins signing this contract so early, I think T finally kind of told him, you know what, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm happy with the way the market's going. I'm ready to be back with the team. I'm ready to get to work with the new offensive coordinator. I mean, obviously, Dan Pitcher's been here in Cincinnati with Brian Callahan, but taking over the reins as offensive coordinator, Zach Taylor, giving up his influence in play calling, at least it sounds like. So, there is new to this offense, and he'll be able to help the young guys and even help himself get up to speed. It's so crucial to have a full offseason with the full offense, and hopefully, knock on wood over here, Joe Burrow can not have an appendectomy or hurt his calf or something like that in the offseason to hurt the training camp. Yeah, the wrist hopefully doesn't come back around. But, it's exciting. It's exactly what you want to see if you're a Bengals fan. You get a dark cloud off the team before everything gets serious.
Let me ask you, because I think the one reason that people are shocked about this, too, is who his agent is.
Right.
This screams he went against his agent's wishes, or probably, this was a little. No, because it's the exact same situation as Jesse Bates, the exact same.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like just based on how his agent has handled these situations in the past, not just with Jesse Bates, but all of his clients, it seems like T. Higgins kind of put his foot down and said, no, I need to get out there. And the reason is this, is he upset that he wants to be a Bengal long term? So when there's certain guys that demand a trade, you have your Schefters and others who may be positioned as he doesn't want to be a Bengal. No, he's pissed off. He's angry. He's demanding a trade because he wants to be a Bengal. Now, I know that sounds weird, but he's angry with the team. He's like, hold on, I want to be here. I want to sign an extension. I want to continue to be a part of the trio that is Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. He wants to be a part of that moving forward. They don't want that. Well, then I don't want to give them my 1 year where I can risk losing everything. Even if there's a chance that I could potentially win a Super Bowl with this group, I'm still going to be a free agent after next year. I can go pick a Super Bowl contender, have my cake and eat it too, as far as that is concerned. Now, with that being said, it does seem like he went against the agent's wishes here because I think he sees big picture what this actually means. I think that this is twofold. It's not as if he's going into a season where it's a bad team and that it's not worth it. It's not worth risking an injury going out there playing for a bad team where you're really not you don't really have a shot of accomplishing something big picture. But when he looks at the wide receiver market, as of right now, despite the fact that a lot of us do believe that T. Higgins has he is a number one wide receiver caliber type of a talent, right? But I do think there's tiers to the number one wide receiver talents that are out there. I mean, you have your Tyreek Hills and you have your Justin Jeffersons and you have your guys like that. And then I think you have your mid-tier guys that I think that's where second tier number one options. And I think that's where T kind of comes into play. Those guys like your Amari Coopers. I don't put Amari Cooper up there with obviously with the Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but I do kind of put T in that category with an Amari Cooper. Still a guy that can get you 1,000 yards, can bring in a lot of touchdowns and could be a guy that is going to demand a lot of attention on the defensive side of the ball. So with that being said, all right, T is looking at that saying, well, if I sit out and don't get my $21.8 million guaranteed this upcoming season, I know I can get a big-time extension and make $25 million for a couple years, sign that extension for the new team next season. Not an extension, but sign with the new team next season. Or he can go out there, have a chance to win a Super Bowl, have a chance to have a big-time season, put up major yardage, get a lot of touchdowns, and then hit the free agent market and go get that big payday next year that could possibly put him past that $25 million a year range. And I think that's ultimately what he's doing. The other aspect of it is you sit out, you don't take part in team activities, then you try to rush back and, let's say that final week of preseason, or you come back week 1 of the NFL season and then you're not in shape. You risk, pulling a hammy. You risk just trying to fast forward a lot of things. And then all of a sudden, you're out for a good chunk of time, and now it's just kind of a faulty season. We saw that with Jesse Bates. Although he didn't really get banged up that year, he didn't have a great year.
Right.
It almost made it like Bengals fans were like, oh, okay, cool. We avoided disaster there. Then he got remotivated, he got paid, he got taken care of, and was one of the top safeties in football last year. All I know is this is a win-win for both sides. I don't think anyone lost here because I saw people saying, oh, man, T had to bow down to the big. No, the Bengals didn't lose here. The T. Higgins didn't lose here. We can't really call a result of this until after the season. If the Bengals ultimately make the playoffs, win the division, deep playoff run, maybe get to a Super Bowl, maybe win a Super Bowl. All right, if they do that, the Bengals, they were right to gamble and do what they did, okay? If, T. Higgins has a monster season and is a part of the success of the Bengals and he gets paid a monster contract next season into that upper echelon of wide receivers, then it was all worth the risk as far as that's concerned. But if things don't go well, and the Bengals lose him for nothing, and T doesn't have a great year and ultimately takes a second-tier type of contract, then both might say, man, it really wasn't worth it big picture, but we'll see what happens. I think that the grade on this is still to be determined, but I think considering the circumstances right now, this was a no-brainer for both sides.
One aspect from T. Higgins' point of view that I think a lot of people might not be talking about is something that I've been championing since basically the beginning of the summer. I wanted to tag him, play him on the tag this year, and then when next season rolls around, tag him again at 120% of this tag, and then trade him on that second tag. With this move for T. Higgins, I wonder if part of what's going on in his head is to build a better rapport with the Bengals front office, kind of mend some of those burnt bridges and stuff like that. And so when next offseason rolls around, if he does have a statistically successful season, puts up the numbers that we expect from T. Higgins and is a top 15, maybe even top 10 receiver in the league this season, that the Bengals let him hit the open market and go wherever he wants to go after negotiating contracts like that, instead of tagging him again and trying to trade him to maybe a lesser than a contender that he could go to if he was a free agent. So I think that's an aspect as well that you might want to look at, T trying to build some better relationships with the front office after how this went down originally.
Again, if you're just joining us here on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, the Justin Kinner Show on Facebook, we appreciate you jumping in and hanging out with us again. Grip it and rip it. New show on Chatterbox Sports. We kind of did like a light launch last week. Jacob learning the producer / host position over there, trying to be Casey.
Trying my best.
On a scale of 1 to Casey, where are you right now?
If we're doing shoe sizes, Casey's about a 20 over here, and I'm sitting about size 9 right now. So we're about halfway there, where we are trying to fill those big shoes.
No, you're doing a great job. Again, we got a brand new little graphics package. Everything looks awesome. And we're going to have a lot of fun with this show Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from noon to 2. And then, of course, you'll still be a part of Off the Bench, from 10 a.m. to noon. And then, of course, we'll change some stuff up as we get closer to the fall, which is what this is all about, right? That's what this is all about. But
everything these days is just counting down moments till you're in the fall.
So I saw 12 Sundays until week 1 of the NFL season, and I'm like, oh, man, that's not that far off. And then I started my right state math. I'm like, 4, 8, 12. That's 3 damn months.
Yeah,
That's
brutal.
3 damn months.
But
that is brutal.
3 months is less than 4 months.
Well, I'm pissed.
So we're getting there.
T could have drugged this out a little bit longer. I mean, we could have done one more week of what's T going to do? What's T going to do? Well, now he has to be boring and get the extension or sign the franchise tender. And now we're like, all right, now what? Well, guess what? Now we turn our attention towards what's next.
That's true. Well,
because there's always something.
Speaking of what might be next, Miles Murphy's brother tweeted last night that he's been holding his tongue and T. Higgins has been in the building for about 3 weeks and a contract extension is close to done.
Hold up. How? I'm not jealous. I'm not angry. Like I'm just fascinated by this. If the Bengals pull this off, good for them. Because I don't think anyone respects their front office. People say, well, look at what they've done, as far as that. I don't know if this would get the respect. The front office would earn respect around the league if they find a way to get Jamar, T, and Burrow together. Or if T gets that extension, does that all of a sudden make you a little concerned about the Jamar Chase stuff? I still am not. I'm going to say 0% chance that you have Jamar and T healthily paid on this roster moving forward. I just don't see how that's a possibility, but that's an interesting drop. I did not hear that. That is very interesting if you ask me.
This is like the 3rd or 4th time that someone on Twitter has said a T contract is done or close to done. So I don't know how much I'm ready to believe yet. I still think an extension's a long shot, and I love T. Higgins. Everyone in Cincinnati loves T. Higgins, don't get me wrong. I'm very firmly in the camp that we should not extend him past this season. I think paying 3 people, Burrow, Jamar Chase, a combined almost $100 million in money per contracts is just not the right way to go about building a team. I understand the pay your offense, draft your defense mentality, but at some point you got to pay some guys on the defense too. So building up the O-line the way we have, I think it'd be hard to keep people around if you're paying all those receivers. I love T back for a year. I hope he gives us the best he has, but I do kind of selfishly hope that this is his last year on the Bengals.
Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett with you here again. Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins officially, signs the franchise tender. He's officially in the fold for the upcoming season, according to ESPN's Ben Baby. Of course, Higgins signed his franchise tag this past Saturday. Of course, a source tells ESPN's Adam Schefter, Jacob's best friend. But by signing the tag, the fifth-year wide receiver is now expected to be at training camp. And that's what's most important about this, is because we're going to talk about the Chiefs and their loud offseason coming up in a bit. We're going to talk about the Jets and their loud offseason coming up here in just a little bit. The one thing you don't want to have is a loud offseason. I think history has told us that about a lot of teams. I'm a Browns fan. I think I know a thing or two about loud offseasons and what that does momentum-wise as far as killing any kind of momentum you have heading into a regular season. And that's the thing. So now that this T thing is kind of put behind them, right? And again, more stuff comes out. Maybe they're close to an extension. To me, I feel like he got this. He went ahead and caved and signed this tender just to put. He knew you're going to play this upcoming season for the Bengals. I think that's why he just signed it, just to get it out of the way, or to what Jacob's talking about, the fact that potentially it's a situation where, okay, maybe they're close to getting a deal done. But let's just assume that that's not the case, that they're not about to get a deal done. It's all about 2024. He is going to play in 2024. We're no longer questioning that. He's going to be ready to go for training camp. Now, it seems like it's a pretty quiet path moving forward to training camp, right? There's not a whole lot of question marks at this point. You sit back, you hope that the pieces you added on defense can fix this team to where they can improve the second worst defense in the NFL last year, statistically at least, right? You hope that some of the adjustments they made in the run game are enough to improve the second worst run game in the NFL last season, statistically, of course. So you hope that those changes are good enough. You hope that losing your offensive coordinator and obviously, moving, some pieces around on the coaching staff, of course, you hope that that's nothing major that they have to overcome, right? Like, hopefully, from a Bengals perspective, the offseason, it's a little bit quiet moving forward. But you as a Bengals fan, because I'm not a Bengals fan, you as a Bengals fans watching, right now on Chatterbox on YouTube, what is that number one thing now that I was like, okay, thank God, T's taken care of. Crap, now we got to worry about blank. What is that thing? Is there anything? What is it about right now that you sit back and say, all right, I'm glad T's taken care of, but man, I'm still a little concerned about fill in the blank?
I think everyone's kind of concerned about the corner position. Cam Taylor-Britt, everyone expects him to take a next position, be a Pro Bowl level player, be one of the best corners in the league, and I would be in that same boat. I think he's a very, very special player. But you have DJ Turner, who showed flashes last year, and then a rookie, Josh Newton, probably competing for that outside spot. Dax Hill trying to play corner. I think trying to find a proven corner out there in the market would be a great way to use this over $20 million the Bengals still have in cap space. I mean, you have names like Xavier Howard, who I know just had some bad press come out about him, some legal problems, so probably stay away from him. But even guys like Stephon Gilmore still out there, some proven veterans that can play corner and bolster that backside of that defense, I think would be where you look now, or internal extensions. I think extending Jamar Chase a year before you absolutely have to would be a great way to operate. And I think extending a guy like, Evan McPherson is something else that you should look at, because he's been one of the best kickers in the league. He's absolutely nails in the playoffs and in regular season games when it matters. So I think extending him is something else I would look at when looking at how to use this almost $21 million in cap space the Bengals still have for this year. But in all honesty, I think they're going to go in to the regular season with basically the roster that they have right now, maybe a couple extensions, maybe a couple depth adds, something along those lines. But I really think the Bengals are happy with their roster right now, even though some people outside might not be. I see some people in the chat, Nate Seltzer especially, saying that you might as well use that $20 million to give T an extension. Give him a 3-year, $75 million extension, front-load it all with a massive signing bonus, eat that cap this year, and then you're basically getting T for around $20 million for the back 2 years of that contract. I think that'd be a phenomenal move for the Bengals. I don't think there's any way T. Higgins is accepting a contract below $100 million. I think he'll be able to get that on a 4 or 5 year deal pretty easily when he hits the open market or with another team if we do end up trading him. So I think T taking a contract for just $75 million, obviously with some higher guarantees in the suggestion you laid out, but I just don't see that as a real possibility. I think he's very content to have one more year in Cincinnati, go for a Super Bowl, and then go elsewhere and try to get his bag. So I don't know. I don't really think the Bengals are going to make any major moves the rest of the offseason. I think you're going into the season with what you have right now.
So, again, question mark. Now that the T. Higgins thing kind of put behind him a little bit, you turn your attention towards what? What is that next? I mean, is it just smooth sailing between now and camp? I think it's smooth sailing for the Bengals. I don't anticipate the one thing. Jack Duffin, Orange and Brown report with the Browns. He's kind of their salary cap expert, if you will. But we have him on our radio show from time to time, and we always talk about just the league in general, some big contracts coming up. And I've learned a lot from him about cash-rich owners versus, everyone, there's a salary cap. Everyone's operating under the same cap. But again, there's a lot of, if you have a lot of money up front, you can manipulate the cap a little bit. I think we see that a lot with the Rams, the Browns, who have had the Haslams forever. I don't know why all of a sudden it almost feels like the Browns have new ownership over the last 5 years. They've always been loaded, I guess, when you're not dealing with little, court cases off to the side with truck stops. I guess you could start to focus on your football team a little bit. It's amazing how that works. But they've been able to load up a roster. Everyone said once you got Deshaun taken care of, that all of a sudden they would just have no money to do anything, and all they've continued to do is add big piece after big piece after big piece and get extension after extension done. Even to me, it doesn't make sense. But a lot of it has to do with money up front to be able to front load some contracts for some of those signing bonuses. So this is why coming into this past offseason, Bengals fans are coming at me saying we have like $70 million cap space. We're gonna load up this roster. I feel like it was kind of an underwhelming free agency period for the Bengals. To their credit, they plugged some holes. They addressed some of their needs, but they didn't go all in. And that $20 million, I don't anticipate them touching that in the coming months heading in. I think a lot of that money is going to be emergency money in case there's a major injury in camp. It's going to be rollover money. You want to roll that over into next offseason because of, again, whether they are getting this secret little deal done with T. Higgins or they're immediately turning their attention towards Jamar Chase, they're going to need some of that money up front to be able to use for bonuses. And it's not just about other players. It also is about Joe Burrow. To restructure that contract, the only way you could restructure it every year is if you have that money up front to roll it into a bonus. Do they have that money up front? I mean, that's the one thing about the Bengals, that they operate behind the eight ball a little bit when it does come to other teams in the National Football League. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means they have to be a little bit more creative. And to their credit, they win. The naming rights to the stadium, and they get a deal done with Burrow. There was no hiccup along the negotiation trail as far as that's concerned. So I think it's going to be a pretty quiet remainder of the offseason heading into training camp coming up, because the only noise that I was anticipating for the Bengals is, well, what if T doesn't report back by training camp? What if he takes this into the season? What can that do? You don't have to worry about that anymore. The low-hanging fruit, Jacob, it's just the wrist. That's easy. That's
fair.
That's an easy one. Look, for everyone out there, the Bengals say he looks good. The Bengals say this. The Bengals say that. Well, of course they're going to tell you that. The Bengals are very secretive with a lot of this stuff. I mean, a lot of NFL teams are. They're not going to put out bad news unless they absolutely have to. I don't think that there's bad news out there, but I'm not convinced that he's just magically A-okay. I mean, there's a reason that, they're saying that they're taking it slow and he had a come to Jesus moment, and now all of a sudden he's perfectly fine with not pushing it to this, that, and the other. I don't know. I just, like I said, that would be the only concern that I would have. And the only thing is about that, you won't get any answers on that until week 1, week 2, week 3, because in preseason, you're not going to have any clue. The social media team for the Bengals, they're only going to put the highlight clips of him throwing it along the sideline.
Playing piano.
Playing piano. Great point. Very quiet weekend for the Bengals media.
It was.
No little hunky-dory stories.
Maybe Joe Burrow was just playing football, which obviously we don't care about. We want piano and throwing towels. So that's all that matters. Yeah. No, yeah, I think the wrist is obviously the big concern. And I think the main thing for me that's making me a little bit less concerned with the wrist, we're not going to do the when he had surgery thing, but it's the fact that the narrative around it is much, much different than the calf injury last year. Everything that the team was saying about Joe's calf last year during offseason was Joe's going to be ready for week 1 at Cleveland. Joe's going to be out there week 1 at Cleveland. He'll be ready to play week 1. We haven't heard the words week 1 ever. Now, obviously, I don't think Joe Burrow has a chance of being out for week 1, but every narrative that they're putting out is Joe Burrow's going to be ready to play in February. Joe Burrow is going to be healthy at the end of the season. So I think they recognize how much he means to this team long term. And if Jake Browning has to start week 1, week 2, say Joe does start the season and he tweaks it in week 3, maybe he sits out for a week or 2, which is not something that was even suggested last year. So I think that shift in mentality has eased my concerns a little bit, just because they are shooting for the long term instead of just rushing him back for week 1, which seemed like was the case last year.
So it's a good point, too. They have changed the message. They either learned their lesson that maybe they put the pressure on him because the fans are expecting him by week 1 because their team, again, I say social media team, they're reporting what's given to them or what they're cleared to put out there. So there's that. But maybe they're trying to ease the expectations, or they're being very honest and, hey, we hope he's back by February. Look, from the outside looking in, I have no reason to believe that he's not going to be ready to go by that week 1.
I agree.
However, it is one of those situations where, I mean, last year opening up against Cleveland, a division team, and he's somewhat ready to rock, you would like to get him out there, right? Like with this, it's a much easier September schedule. Not that there's such thing as easy in the NFL, but I mean, there's some sneaky games in there as far as that's concerned. But it is one of those where you have a very good backup quarterback. You have a good offensive line. You hope you improve the run game. You hope that the defense is better. They won 9 games last year with the second worst defense and second worst run game. Now, I know those numbers are being manipulated, but at the end of the day, that's just the reality of it, right? You won 9 games. You were a last-place team, but you weren't a last-place team. You're a 500 team. Right. 500 team without Joe Burrow and having the second worst defense, run game, this, that, and the other. You tweak those things. You're just an average run team. You're just an average defense. That's a playoff team last year without Joe Burrow. And they need to have that. They need to remain confident that they could still win some games without Joe Burrow and not risk losing the big picture goal, which is getting to a Super Bowl, this, that, and the other. But nonetheless, we'll get into and we'll continue with some NFL talk coming up here in just a little bit. We'll do more as far as that's concerned of our top 5 players in the NFL that are facing the most pressure heading into this season, the prove-it season, if you will. They have a lot to prove. Now, we'll get into that coming up here in just a little bit, but I just want people to be thinking about that because we will interact with you. If you put yours in the chat, we'll, of course, read those, and have you I heard we have some cool graphics. We'll have a little graphic.
Yeah, they're ready to roll.
They're ready to rock. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I want to get into what's not what's trending, but just kind of news, not news, a little bit here in the middle. I figured we had to open up with the T. Higgins thing. Like, that was big news from over the weekend. Positive news at that. A lot of times you don't get, how many times do you get positive news in the month of June?
Rare.
Especially after camp, it's usually more drama with contract negotiations.
Injuries, holdouts.
Injuries. Oh, he pulled a hammy in camp, and now it's an injury to keep an eye on heading in to training camp, this, that, and the other. So all I'm saying is that's a good thing for the Cincinnati Bengals when they're used to getting a lot of bad news from time to time, especially this time of year. But anything good in the chat? Anyone as far as the Bengals? Anyone concerned about anything? Feel good about the Bengals? Everything A-okay?
Everyone's just saying Deshaun Watson is the most approved, so we'll get to that. But they're already flooding in.
He's in my. I think that's a no-brainer.
Spoiler alert.
I think that's a no-brainer.
Oh, he's in mine too.
No one's breaking news with that one. No one's breaking news with that one as far as that's concerned. So I got this new little iPad. Trying to look all professional here.
It looks fancy.
I don't know. Oh, there it is. We're good. So now we can do a little news or not news. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett with you here. Grip it and rip it. We appreciate you hanging out on the YouTube side of things, of course. News, not news. I thought this was big coming out of the baseball world. Dodgers shortstop. What are you pointing
That's a good graphic up there.
News, not it gets the job done, dude. It gets the people now know that we're talking about news or maybe not.
Or maybe not news.
You only have 2 options.
Right.
So news or not news, Dodgers shortstop Mookie Betts broke his left hand when he was hit by a pitch during the 7th inning in their 3-0 win over the Kansas City Royals. Mr. Jacob Tissett, news or not news?
I think when a guy who's minus money to win MVP just like 70 games into the season gets hurt, it's obviously news. And I think it's even bigger news in a city like Cincinnati where Elly Cruz probably now has the inside lane to start at shortstop in the All-Star game. Everything's pointing that way with Mookie with the broken hand. He'll probably at least be out a month or 2, and that would overlap with the All-Star game. And Elly might be able to slide in there and start at shortstop. So pretty cool news if you want to spin it that way for the Reds, but definitely news for the baseball world as a whole. Mookie had been playing on a different level this season.
I did not think of it like that as far as what it meant for the Cincinnati Reds, but I'm looking at the Los Angeles Dodgers right now. They have an 8-game lead over the Padres in the West. They are a playoff team. They are going to win the West unless things just crumble with injuries. But I know this sounds wild. One of the best players in baseball goes out with a broken wrist. Like, yeah, that's news. But to me, big picture, when it's about, like, if Elly Cruz broke his wrist, we'd give up on the season, right?
That's true.
So to me, Elly Cruz, if he breaks his wrist, not happening. Okay, if he breaks his wrist, we're giving up. I'm giving up. I'm a quitter. I'll quit on the Reds. Okay, I'll do it in a heartbeat if he goes down. When you're the Dodgers and you have an all-star lineup, you have an all-star team, you have depth and every dollar in the world to spend. To me, it's the only reason I'm kind of saying this isn't news. It stinks that he won't be at the ballpark. It stinks that you won't get to watch him when your team plays him, or you're going to watch him live at a ballpark. But outside of that, I don't think the Dodgers go into a tailspin without him. Obviously, it doesn't help them, but I don't think it hurts them as much as you would think. This team's still winning the division. They're going to be a playoff team. If we get closer to September and he's not back, that's a little bit of concern. It might be news to me a little bit later on. But as of right now, mid-June, I just don't think this is big in news is what some people might react to it. But again, I get what you're saying. It's a big name. It's the MVP candidate. From that perspective, I guess, yeah, but big picture, I don't think it hurts anything as of right now.
They're going to win 110 games with or without him, so.
Yep, so that's kind of where I'm at as far as that's concerned. News or not news, Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley announces that next season, or he announced this past Friday night that next season will be his last on NBA TV, but all TV. He is retiring after next season. News or not news?
I think it's news. I think the NBA drastically overestimates what makes people watch those games, and as reductionist as it may seem, I think NBA on TNT inside the NBA was a big reason a lot of people turn on the game. I mean, Charles Barkley, Ernie Johnson, Shaq, Kenny, that whole crew is just absolutely incredible every single game, night in and night out, and they mean, the clips on social media obviously do insane numbers, and they get viewership like crazy when the NBA is dipping this year for one of the first times in a long time. Finals viewership is down drastically, obviously on ESPN, not TNT, but removing that inside the NBA, one of the most recognizable aspects of the NBA season, removing that from the mix, I mean, that's going to make a major difference for the NBA. And you wonder what happens when guys like LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry are nearing the end of their career. We don't see a true big-name superstar grabbing a firm hold of that face of the league conversation we had last week. If you lose these main TV pull superstars as well as your marquee pregame show, where's the NBA headed? I mean, we see the finals this year getting the lowest viewership they have in a while. Regular season has dipped, pretty considerably over the last however many years, every year in a row. I wonder if the NBA thinks that they're more invincible than they are, and we're going to see them take a big step back here soon.
Yeah, it's weird saying, I mean, the games should matter, the stars should matter. It's weird saying that Charles Barkley retiring is bad for the NBA because he technically retired back in the 90s, right? Technically, but he retired as a player. Charles Barkley has meant, and he's a top, 75 player, all that fun stuff. You go back to those awards and all that, but losing him as an analyst hurts the NBA more than when he retired as a player. And he's one of the, the best, probably one of the best to never win a ring, all this, that, and the other. They love to let him know that. But yeah, I do think that there's going to be a huge void. And he gets the best out of Shaq. Shaq gets the best out of him. The chemistry with that little network pregame and just the NBA today, whatever, not really pregame, halftime, postgame, whatever you want to call it, just the network show in general. That's a huge loss for the NBA. And there, I saw, I think, who was just Mark Fetters. What up, Mark? He says, who will replace Chuck? I mean, it's kind of like, I remember we had Tommy Thraw on years ago when Marty retired, and I said to go, there's a lot of pressure. You got to replace Marty, and he goes, you're not. I'm not. He goes, I'm not replacing Marty. I'm here to call Reds on radio, but at no point in my interview with the Cincinnati Reds was I told that you are here to replace Marty. They even overlapped a little bit, and I think that's how it's going to be with Charles Barkley because that's a personality you don't replace. Draymond, okay, but I'm not tuning in to hear his unhinged self. So
and is he going to retire to go sit at the desk next year? Probably not.
I don't know, man. I don't know. You know who? He's not nearly as entertaining, but we get to watch the crossover with the two a lot during March Madness. But I like Clark Kellogg. I really like Clark Kellogg.
I like Kellogg.
He's just his personality is drastically different than Charles or whatever, but he brings credibility as far as I'm concerned. But I think they want an NBA guy in there. They'll probably look at a Candace Parker or something. I don't know, but you're not replacing Charles. That's big news.
Since they're moving off of TNT, one guy who I hope gets into the mix more, Tim Legler from ESPN. He's one of my favorite basketball analysts, and they just stick him on SVP at night to talk at 12:30 a.m. about the games and stuff. And he does great in-depth analysis. So hopefully ESPN sticks him on the desk for a little bit.
Colin Will, what up, Colin? He goes, they're just going to hire all the LeBron cult followers. Are you a LeBron cult follower?
Big time. Making my pilgrimage up to the museum in Akron some point this summer.
There is a museum?
Oh, his childhood home's museum now. There's like the shoes he wore in the finals, like the block ball, like stuff like that. Like a lot of just one-of-one LeBron memorabilia. I'm a big LeBron fan. I want to go check it out.
I'm a LeBron fan too. I guess I'm just used to meeting all the jokes. I don't know what the line is on here on YouTube, so I'll just avoid all the jokes.
Fair.
I usually come with bringing up LeBron James, but it's usually fill in the blank with whatever you want to call him politically after, right? Like, me and you have talked. I've said before, I tune into sports for sports, and even when sports takes a left or a right turn, see what I did there? I don't go with them. I'm tuning. Okay, you're talking that? Cool. When you're back around the hardwood, I'll watch you out there as far as that's concerned. But yes, look, LeBron does have a lot of power. Let's not act like that's not the case, too. I mean, but at the end of the day, how much power does he have in the tail end of his career, the last remaining years that he has? I mean, he is about to get his untalented son drafted. I mean, I guess that is pretty damn powerful, if you ask me. What do you laugh for? I mean, like NBA, he's un-NBA talented.
I don't necessarily agree. I don't think he's a first-round talent, but
dang,
it's the same. It's basically the same stat line Jimmy Butler had as a freshman at Marquette. And he played better defense. I think he could be Drew Holiday. That's my comp for Bronny. I think his ceiling's probably Drew Holiday. I think he could be a very legitimate NBA defender, and then he could probably score somewhere in the 10 to 12 range off the bench if he gets to the right system. I think he'd be a viable pick. He'll definitely go above where he should go to try to lure a year or two out of LeBron, but I think he'd get drafted without his dad being LeBron.
Damn, you are the cult follower. Like, I thought, like, I'm a LeBron fan, but like you drink the Kool-Aid. Like,
love that, man.
No, and look, by the way, it'll be a great storyline if he is, so I'm kind of hoping that's the case, but it's just basketball logic is just 34 years old, and you bring up Jimmy Butler, that's great, but like if LeBron was not, if Bronny's dad was not LeBron, he's not being looked at anywhere. I mean, he would
have went back to college, to be fair.
Yeah, and people were mad when he was a McDonald's All-American. They said they had like a list of like 5 players that should have been on that roster over him, but then I'm like, once again, people getting mad about a fast food all-star game that no one watches anymore. So do you care about that game anymore, by the way?
I watch it almost every year just because I think the recruits are cool. Alabama had 3 recruits playing in it this year, so I tuned in to see how they did. But outside of that, I mean, I don't really care about being an All-American or not anymore.
I think freshman year of college, I remember they were in Columbus at the Shot, and it was Kyrie's year. So I got a chance to see Kyrie, but I forgot who some of the other names that came out that year that Kyrie did. But either way. But no, you don't have to look that up. I'm just saying that was cool. But that was the last time I actually cared about going and this, that, and the other. But now I
think college basketball or high school basketball recruiting has lost a lot of its luster. It used to be even bigger than football recruiting because you'd see the one and done freshman play right away. But with the transfer portal, and I mean, you see a 5th-year senior Coleman Hawkins get $2 million over the weekend to go to Kansas State. The allure of drafting or of signing a top freshman class, running 5 18-year-olds out there winning a championship and sending them to the NBA seems to be completely dead. I mean, that's why Calipari is no longer the coach at Kentucky. So, I mean, that different mindset, I think, has taken a lot of the allure away from those All-American games as well, just because you don't see the players as instantly as you used to.
Sean Connor, too, going back to I don't even know how we got there. We went from Charles Barkley retiring to McDonald's All-American games, dude. That's quite the range right there on a Monday. But the 5-hour energy is working. In fact, I got a second one ready to rock.
I love it.
Number 2.
10 hours? Or is it multiplied? Is it 25?
It's called, and on the back it says a visit to the doctor will be promised if that's the case. But no. So Sean Connor says that, Clark Kellogg and Jay Wright had some big-time disagreements this past March. I don't recall. I'm not saying he's wrong. I just don't recall. I think after like the first week, I don't really pay attention to that. But that's how good.
I never watched halftime or pregame or anything in March Madness because I flipped to the other game.
Yep.
Like I never see the desks in March Madness.
Yeah, the desk talk. Well, that was going to be my next point too about the fact that that's how good Charles Barkley is, and this is how valuable he is. Like everyone out there that complains that he doesn't even watch college basketball. Well, again, his job is to be a full-time NBA analyst at the same time that college basketball is going on. He's doing his best to try to sound as prepared as possible for all of these college games during March Madness. People get mad at him. The network knows that people get mad. They know that he is probably not the most buttoned up with every single team that makes the tournament, but let's be very clear. That's how entertaining he is. That's how valuable he is, and that's how good he is. That's going to be a tough one to replace. The thing I'm always curious that, what do people really want from these network shows? Because you say Tim Legler, and I like Tim Legler. Don't get me wrong. I like Brian Windhorst. I like a lot of those the NBA analysts, this, that, and the other. But like, do you want analysts? Do you want nerd guy? And that's not a shot at these guys. Let me be 1,000,000% clear. Do you want that insightful reporting, or do you want the churro jokes? Do you want the fat women in San Antonio jokes? Do you want to be entertained? I feel like what we have learned from that inside NBA, I feel like we just want to be entertained a little bit, more so than anything else. And I do think that there's a way to accomplish both. And I think that's why Ernie's there. And Kenny's a combination of both. And Shaq is just Shaq. And Barkley's that personality. It was the perfect storm. It was the perfect combination. That's why I don't think you replace him.
Right.
I think you have to reshape some stuff too. But I think Ernie is the most important thing of keeping that all together. Keeping Ernie there is very important as far as that goes. But I don't know. What do you like when you tune into those? What are you going to teach? I don't know. I guess I just want to be entertained. Stephen A. People get so mad that he's there. The bottom line is, I know he drives everybody nuts when he walks into the arena and they're doing the player entrance.
I'm glad they watermarked that. I was gonna steal that for our Twitter.
I know. I'm so bummed we couldn't use it. But the bottom line is that's one of their most viewed every time they put that out there, it's one of their most viewed, engaged tweets or social media postings out there. So I don't know. The bottom line is the personality. Stephen A's proof of that. The personalities matter, but I do think you need a little bit of a blend. I'm curious to see what they do.
I think part of why Inside the NBA worked so well is because they joke around and have fun, but as soon as Charles Barkley or Shaquille O'Neal drop a nugget about what's going on the court, everyone hones in right away because they're the two of the better players in their position of all time. So, to have that kind of, validation about whenever they do flip that switch and go analytical, I think is what made their give and take, the comedy aspect of it, more bearable, I guess, for me. I think a lot of people, the general population, does want just the entertainment aspect at that halftime spot, but I think there is a space for more analytical people at pregame, postgame, halftime shows. I think that's an area we're missing, and I know a lot of people in the chat especially don't watch hockey, don't watch the Stanley Cup Finals, but their desk is very analytical. It's Mark Messier and PK Subban. Not a whole lot of fun being had at the desk. Obviously, PK cracks some jokes. He's a pretty funny guy, but they're breaking down the ins and outs of the game. They're doing film review and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, Kenny runs to his Jumbotron and does his film review, which is fun and great, but I think there's something to be taken from that NHL broadcast that is a little bit more analytical while still having fun, but providing more ins and outs of the game, which I do personally enjoy.
And that's going to be the thing. I was reading some of these, and of course it froze on me, so my apologies as far as that's concerned. But again, we'll see. And by the way, there's a chance he doesn't retire too.
Oh, always.
I guess they put out a list of like 5 times on air that he said he's retiring and he doesn't. But this one seemed different. I don't know if you saw the clip. This one seemed different as far as that's concerned. News or not news, last NBA thing here, and then another NFL one coming up around the corner. Adam Silver, NBA commissioner, was interviewed at halftime, believe it or not, during game 4 or 5 or whatever it was. But he was asked about the non-competitiveness of the NBA All-Star Game. Now, a lot of you probably don't care about the NBA All-Star Game, and that's probably the first time you've ever had anything in common with NBA players because they don't seem to give a damn about it either. So when he was asked, Adam Silver was asked about how do you improve and how do you fix the All-Star Game, I mean, I don't think there's any amount of money in the world. I don't think there's any bells and whistle in the world that you can add to the All-Star Game to make people care. And that the NBA players just don't care. And this quote's kind of alarming for those of you that are All-Star Game enthusiasts. Adam Silver says, Jacob, that we may be past the point where guys and teams are incentivized to play competitive All-Star games in the middle of the season. That's a problem. That's a problem. And that's a problem for the NBA because they keep just forcing it. They keep forcing it because it's a moneymaker. You still have cities that bid on it. Big cities bid on it, this, that, and the other. And that matters. It's part of the media rights deal. When the NBA sells, gets ESPN and NBC and all these others, some of it is the rotating. You're going to have the All-Star Game on NBC. You're going to have the All-Star Game on ESPN. It's that rotating thing. Like, they're going to make money off it. They're going to continue to force it, but the players are making it such an unenjoyable thing to watch. He's basically saying, well, we might be past the point that I don't think there's any incentive out there for these guys to want to play hard. I think that's going to be a problem for a lot of fans, no doubt.
I understand most people don't like the All-Star Game. I'm obviously not a huge fan of it now, but I like what they've done, making it the Elam ending with the final point. So at least that fourth quarter, quote unquote, when they're going to that final score, that target score, at least gets a little bit more interesting. I mean, you saw Kyle Lowry take 2 charges, whatever that was, a year or 2 ago. So you get a little bit of excitement in there, a little bit of real basketball. But I'm in a very small minority that doesn't really care that the brand of basketball in the All-Star Game has gotten crappy. I mean, you get highlight dunks, you get deep threes. I have just as much fun watching that. You bet on the over and just kick your feet up and have a good time. So I don't really hate as much about what the All-Star Game has become. The guys certainly aren't incentivized to play in it. I think a fix to the All-Star weekend is fixing the other events. I mean, the three-point shootout has gotten pretty numb. The dunk contest, there's no original options really anymore. I mean, you can't do a between the legs dunk 4 times in a row and expect to get 10s nonstop. And we've been doing the dunk contest forever. So that's kind of drying up. I think the only way you fix that is you make the winner get a massive, massive payday and make superstars do it, because between the legs 360 from G Leaguer Mac McClung and a between the legs 360 from LeBron are getting me different levels of excited. So if you're running out of different dunks and different stuff to do, I think you have to find a way to get the star players into it. And you could honestly do away with the All-Star game as a whole and just move the Rising Stars game, the freshman versus sophomores game, to the final day. Those guys are incredibly incentivized to play. It kind of gets stashed in the midday of All-Star Saturday, and no one really watches that game. That game's been electric for years, and we see the young talent come into the league being better and better. So why not put those guys on a marquee stage? If you're going to do away with the All-Star game instead of trying to come up with, dodgeball or whatever like the NFL did, my vote would be to move the freshman sophomore game up to the marquee slot.
Obviously wouldn't be as big of a deal. Here's a couple things I would do to tweak the NBA All-Star game as well. Take it. I wouldn't have it in NBA arenas. Like, go to the Sphere in Las Vegas. I guess it's hard in February to do this, but we see hockey do the
stadium.
The state, try to do maybe an NFL an outside. I guess we've seen college do that on some of those ships and stuff, at the Navy Yards and stuff, which was pretty cool. Of course, that backfired one year. Ohio State, Michigan State, I think, played, and they ended up canceling the game because the floor was too slick because it was just too it was wild. But maybe mix that up. But the other thing is the dunk contest. Maybe have once every couple years or, something. I don't know. They got to mix it up. But I've always said, too, if you're voted as an all-star, you should be required to participate in one of the activities.
I like that.
Out of the all. So if you're LeBron, whether it's the skills competition, the three-point contest, or the dunk contest, you got to participate in one of those three.
I like that.
If you're lazy, you just want to do the skills so what? It'll be cool to see LeBron out there doing this. The Wembanyama three-point Wembanyama dunk contest, whatever. But just the starters. If you are a starter, you have to the fans voted you. That is a privilege, and I believe that they should be a part of that. And they can incentivize it with more money, this, that, and the other. But something along those lines. I don't want to watch Matt McClung or whatever the hell his name is. I don't want to watch him in the dunk contest. I don't care that he won it. I don't care. What did that do for the NBA? How did that better your sport? Forcing the guys that the fans voted on to be more visible in these types of contests. Now, that helps grow your sport. That's going to put more eyes on it. It's going to put more eyes on that individual. You're going to grow somebody. That matters. Daquan Cook, former Buckeye, he's from Dayton. Had him on the show a few times. He's another one. No one outside of Buckeye fans, no one ever heard of him. But he won that three-point contest, and people started to hear about him a little bit. But he was at least a role player in the NBA. That's a G League guy winning this. What did you benefit from that? So that's kind of where I'm at. I think starters should participate, even if you're not a good dunker. I've said before, rather than watching McClung do all those cool dunks and everything that he did, I'd rather watch LeBron do a boring two-handed layup than watch him light himself on fire, jump through a hula hoop, avoid being eaten by a tiger, and dunking on a bear. I would much rather watch LeBron do a layup than that.
I think maybe another fix to the dunk contest is go completely the other way and don't even do NBA players. Bring in the best dunkers in the world. Let's see the best dunk contest you can put on.
You ever watch the college dunk contest?
It's incredible.
It's wild. I'm like, wait, these dunks exist? It is.
Have you ever seen some of these professional dunk contests? It's like long drive. It's not even basketball players. All they do is train verticals and stuff. It's incredible. I mean, some of these dunks are you've never even seen before. We talk about losing originality. It's because these guys are training to play basketball. You actually need some lateral movement and stuff like that. All these professional dunkers are just training verticals and throwing their entire body through the hoop when they jump up, and that stuff's pretty cool. So NBA puts a decent backing behind that. Those guys would be incentivized to do it. It'd be good for the viewers, get their names out there. I don't know, just a different idea.
Colin Will says, speaking of the All-Star game, and I agree with this wholeheartedly. Yeah. The Cleveland Browns have
three.
They have
Jameis
three.
was.
Yeah, they have 3 Pro Bowl quarterbacks. Okay, that's ridiculous. Okay. What's the backup?
Tyler Huntley?
Tyler Huntley, yes. When he was named as a Pro Bowl alternate quarterback, now he'll always be able to call himself a Pro Bowl quarterback. That is the most asinine thing I've ever heard of. So Colin Will says, speaking of the All-Star game, for the NFL, can we get rid of calling players like Mac Jones a Pro Bowler because he was like the 6th alternate and a bunch of people dropped out? I could not agree more.
But Mac had that 50-yard gritty scramble touchdown in the Pro Bowl. That was cool.
Legendary. Retire his jersey now. Unbelievable. How bad was that draft class, by the way?
Whew.
I mean, even the one quarterback from that draft class that is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now, people were like,
Yeah.
Wild class as far as that's
all
concerned.
Backups outside of Trevor, right?
But, yeah.
It's crazy.
Last one here. News, not news. Kansas City Chiefs defensive lineman Isaiah Buggs. Ever heard of him? Has been arrested for the 2nd time in a month. That's impressive. So he was, again, got in trouble when he was back home in Alabama. Oh, that's your old stomping
Tuscaloosa.
ground. So you maybe, but nonetheless, news or not news, again, may not be the biggest name on this Kansas City Chiefs roster, not a big name at all, but again, another incident for the Kansas City Chiefs. News or not news?
I'm going to go not news just because it is Isaiah Buggs, and like he might not have even made the roster anyway. But at some point when these stories keep piling up, someone has to ask questions about what's going on culture-wise in Kansas City. I mean, all these players from your number one target, Rashee Rice, early in the summer getting in a car wreck and fleeing his car, all the way down to bottom of the roster, Isaiah Buggs, who just 2 weeks ago got 2 felonies for fighting dogs. And now he's in jail again last night or over the weekend. So at some point, it's going to mount up to a point where it is news. But, I think it's got to be a slightly bigger name for me to care quite. I mean, but it is June, so everything's an NFL story.
And by the way, I do believe if there was nothing else that happened this offseason, I don't even think this would have made the ticker. It would have. I mean, it might have made the ticker, and backup defensive lineman, hoping to make the roster, gets in trouble, blah blah blah. And we wouldn't even have talked about it here. The reason it's news is because it's just more noise. You don't want noise in an offseason, negative noise, by the way. And it seems like the Kansas City Chiefs, when's the last time we talked about them as the back-to-back Super Bowl champions? Everything has just been, whether it was Rashee Rice, as you talked about, whether it's Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, whether it's, of course, obviously with the Bugs right here, you have the kicker and Butker with his speech that he did that got a lot of negative attention as far as that's concerned. You go back to, last offseason, or maybe it was whenever it was, with Andy Reid's son. You also had Eric Bieniemy, who even when they were winning, it's because they're winning it for him, is the league trying to keep him from succeeding and getting head coaching jobs. It's just always noise. So there's two ways of looking at it. Yes, this is news because it's just one more bullet point of news or off-season noise, if you will. But then the other thing is, I've never really seen a team navigate through so much noise and just continue being them. They trade away Tyreek Hill. They go on to win 2 Super Bowls. Moving on from Tyreek Hill is loud. If the Cincinnati Bengals moved on from Jamar Chase, it would be a loud offseason. It would be a very controversial move. It doesn't seem controversial now that Tyreek Hill was traded. I know we talked about this last week, Jacob. It doesn't seem controversial now. They've won back-to-back Super Bowls, but at the time it was like, what are you doing?
Right.
They made the right choice, but at the time it was like, what are you doing? And then it leads to the Eric Bieniemy noise, and then you have Andy Reid's son that gets in trouble the week of the Super Bowl, and then you have all the noise this past offseason. The Taylor Swift thing, of course, that took on a whole wave of noise itself. But in their defense, the reason you can make an argument that none of this is news is because it just seems like it's another day. Kansas City just seems so boring. But they make Kansas City sound like it is just wild, like it's Las freaking Vegas over there. They're the only reason that Kansas City's relevant and that they matter in anything. So it's just absolutely wild to me. Kansas City seems like a place that what happens in Kansas City stays in Kansas City. It's the only time I've ever heard of it being a place that just provides as many distractions as Miami. Come on. Give me a break. It's news, but I could see why people say it's not news. They overcome noise all the time, and they're back-to-back Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, some point in the chat, doesn't matter what happens with the Chiefs. As long as Mahomes at quarterback, they're the Super Bowl favorites. And I think that's basically where I'm at right now with all these stories. It's great. As a Bengals fan, hopefully it knocks him off that three-peat trajectory. But, look, I'm not getting too optimistic about anything happening. I think Rashee Rice will play week 1. I think if Buggs was better, he'd probably play week 1. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I think it's all a whole lot of nothing in Kansas City, and they're just going to hit the ground running when the season starts.
So it's interesting. A while back, I remember Kevin and I talked about this on our show. Which offseason is more of a concern? At the time, now keep in mind, T's taken care of now, right? We could put that to rest. But at the time, was the Bengals offseason, is that more concerning, or the Chiefs? Now, there's no comparing the two as far as noise is concerned, right? But I made the argument that I'd much rather have Kansas City's noise because they've proven that they could overcome noise. They're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. They were overcoming the Taylor Swift distraction. Rashee Rice, okay. They've lost Tyreek Hill and continued trucking along, and they lose Rice. Oh, well, it's not convenient, but oh, well. With the Bengals, you don't want noise that's going to lead to distractions heading into camp. And I believe T could have been a distraction heading into camp. With Joe Burrow's injury, that could be a distraction heading into camp. So it wasn't a hot take. I just felt like, I'd still rather deal with Kansas City's noise than Cincinnati. But Cincinnati's noise has quieted quite a lot, right? I don't think there's noise at all, as we talked about to open up the show today. But, yeah, I got a lot of heat from your fan base for that. Oh, you're just stirring the pot. I'm like, I at least brought points to the table. Y'all just calling names.
To be fair, you get paid to stir the pot.
But it's only stirring the pot if you're just like Adam Schefter. You guys hate Adam Schefter for what? What do you guys hate Adam Schefter for?
For stirring the pot.
What's he stirring the pot with? He's not even an opinion giver. He reports. You guys are soft sometimes. You guys get your feelings hurt.
I didn't even see a Schefter tweet about Amari Cooper holding out, and you would have thought T. Higgins killed an old lady.
But I thought you guys said no one cares about the Browns. So who cares about the Browns? Now you want people to care about the Browns? Come on, Jacob.
Just play it both ways. If you're going to tweet about Pro Bowl receivers holding out, tweet about all Pro Bowl receivers holding out.
You need a 5 hour. You're getting a little cranky over there.
I need
You're getting a little
Snickers.
defensive. You're getting a little defensive. It's my guy Shefty. If T. Higgins didn't show up, don't get mad at Shefty. Get mad at T.
That's fair. But when he did, Adam scrolled the Google images till about page 4 to find that picture of him frowning. So
You're upset about that? Woo! I didn't see, and this is why when you got the Sports Illustrated guys, like, pretty funny moment in practice today, Joe Burrow threw a flag in the air. He thought he was an official.
that's funny.
You guys eat that stuff up. Attention to detail. I'll give you guys that. I wanted to notice the frowny face that you guys noticed, but then again, I'm a Browns fan. Everything looks sad in Cleveland, so it is what it is. But nonetheless, Reds and Pirates coming up later on tonight. Carson Spiers on the mound for the Cincinnati Reds. Paul Skenes, our first chance to see him. We didn't get to talk about it last week. I had it on the rundown and never got to it for both shows. But the Cardinals fan base. Skenes pitched such a magnificent game, and I don't even remember what the stat line was, but apparently it wasn't a no-hitter. Okay? Wasn't a no-hitter. But when he got taken out of the game, he got a standing ovation from the Cardinals fans. I don't care what happens, okay? And this game's in Pittsburgh, right? Yeah, it's in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
So it's in Pittsburgh, so it's not really relevant to Great American Ballpark in this occasion. But if Skenes, the first time he pitches at Great American Ballpark, let's be clear, this is supposed to be like it could be the next big name and pitcher in baseball, and
Certainly.
maybe already is basically at this point. But the bottom line is there is nothing that an opposing player can do that I'm going outside of, DeMar Hamlin passing away on the field and then ultimately, coming back. Like, sure, that's like real life. But I don't care. As fans, you should be so competitive that you should not cheer or applaud a great performance from an opposing pitcher, especially a divisional opponent. I can't believe what I saw with Skenes last week when the Cardinals fan base gave him a standing ovation as he got pulled out of the game, and that was absolutely insane and ridiculous to me. Reds fans, don't do it.
I couldn't agree more. The only chance maybe that you have something like that happens is like a hometown kid finally gets up to a kid from Mull or St. X or Elder or something like that's pitching in the away team and has like a no-hitter and he loses the no-hitter and comes out of the game. Maybe you give him a cheer. But Paul Skenes has no connection to St. Louis, nothing like that. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Before we move on, there is breaking news that we're both going to be interested.
Let me guess.
You want to guess?
NFL?
NFL related.
Browns related.
And Bengals related.
Is it AFC North related? Or
It's
just
AFC North related.
Lamar's out for the season?
No injuries.
No injury. Oh, it's injury related.
It's not injury related.
Deshaun.
It's not even player related.
Oh, I got nothing. Are they playing a game
The
overseas?
in-season NFL Hard Knocks will follow the AFC North. All 4 teams in-season Hard Knocks series following the AFC North.
Love it.
If you're going to follow a division, there is not a better division in football than the AFC North. I mean, you hate each other, all 4 teams, and you have 4 at least fringe playoff teams. They're all going to be fighting for it in the mix. They all have exciting storylines. Burrow's injury, everything with Deshaun, Lamar after an MVP, Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett's long gone. It's Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields. So very, very exciting storylines in the AFC North. I'm usually not a Hard Knocks guy because I think it gets in the way of training camp, but doing the in-season stuff, I think that'll be really, really cool to watch.
You get upset by frowny faces. So
I do.
It doesn't surprise me that you don't like that. No, I do like that Hard Knocks is getting. They're being a little bit more creative with how they're going about doing stuff. I mean, Hard Knocks has been one of the most entertaining, kind of off-season or I guess preseason type of programming that's out there. I love that. I'm one that grew up. I always wanted to be a coach when I grew up. Like that's what I've always wanted. So I'm always fascinated by coaching. More so on basketball. I was huge on baseball. So I love seeing basketball. I mean, I love seeing how athletes and coaches just interact. And like with what you did at Alabama, like we joked last week, but I still think that's fascinating. I think that's so cool because it's one thing we as fans, we get to tune in to media to watch the games. We might get some open practices that we go to, but coaches manipulate open practices to not give the media much. They're protecting their players. They're not going to do a lot of drills that are going to potentially make their quarterback look bad as far as overthrowing guys or potentially getting hit, this, that, and the other. They're protecting their guys. So open practices for media they're set up to protect the team a little bit. Now, it's a little different in the NFL. It's a little bit more open season there, especially during camp. But I love watching how players interact with one another, how they respond to coaching. When coaches have to give bad news, like to break bad news to players. That's what I love about that show. It's kind of that built-in drama. Some people can't handle it. So they got mad at, Jeff Fisher with the Rams back, when they did that back in the day. People didn't like how he handled some of the releasement of players, this, that, and the other. So I love it. I like that they've adapted. They're doing an in-season Hard Knocks. They've done, they did one with the Giants. I think that was like a draft day Hard Knocks. They followed the draft, I believe.
I think they're like off-season process for their 100-year or whatever. Yeah.
So I like that they're being a little creative with it, but I think that right now the ratings for that have dipped the last couple because I think it's like not all these teams aren't willing to do it. They don't want the cameras on them the entire time. So I think that by splitting up the Hard Knocks series amongst 4 teams, maybe it's less camera time. I don't know, but I love it. In the AFC North, the best division in football, the most intriguing storylines. It's actually going to be a perfect segue coming up here in a few to our top 5 NFL players with the most to prove. I think it's going to be perfect and overlap with a lot of mine. I'm curious what your list is going to be. But I love it. There's no division that is more intriguing than that one right there.
Absolutely.
And I don't even think it's close.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You could argue best maybe with the NFC West with the Niners and the Seahawks and the Rams, but I really do think the AFC North is not only the best division but the most interesting with the most stars. I mean, even the Steelers, who have distantly the 4th best quarterback, Russell Wilson's still a massive name. You deal with the Broncos paying him almost a max contract to play for a different team, so that's a storyline in and of itself. We'll see what happens with Justin Fields and all that stuff. I think Hard Knocks went 2 for 2. I think the Bears training camp Hard Knocks is going to be great. You're going to see Caleb Williams come in and, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, a lot of exciting names on that offense. Montez Sweat, first offseason in Chicago after the trade deadline move last year. I think both of the Hard Knocks series this year are going to be really exciting. So we'll see, obviously see what happens when they come out. But yeah, I'm excited.
So we really need a Casey for the breaking news sounder, but that is interesting. So if you're just joining us here again, grip it and rip it. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett. Yes, that rhymes. That was unintentional, but that's just part of the beauty of the show. So we're very happy with that. But breaking news, if you're just joining us again, Hard Knocks announces that the entire division of the AFC North will be followed for Hard Knocks this upcoming camp. I think that's pretty exciting. Again, now I say the best division in football, and I said it confidently, but I did forget, there's only one other I keep calling it conference. There's only one other division that has a potential to have 4 teams above 500, and I think that is the West, the NFC West.
Yeah.
The NFC West and the North, I think if you ask, NFC West Coast are going to pick their division because they're locked into that the way we're locked into ours. But I think that the class of quarterbacks makes the AFC North better. And
we saw both the Ravens and the Bengals go and dismantle the 49ers last year in the regular season. So
I like how you slid that in there. Good. Yeah, the Browns did it with the backup quarterback. They couldn't do it. They didn't need their starter to beat them. They had to do it with one of the worst backups in the NFL. I'm just saying. But you did it without a defense.
That's true.
We did it with
or
the
run
game. So we did it with the coach of the year, though. You have less of a talented coach, I guess. Two-time. Yeah.
Two-time.
So. It's my guy, Zach Taylor, over in Cincinnati, though. I give him a little more credit. But, yeah, I'll take the AFC North slightly over the West just because of the quarterback play.
Right.
We have a 2-time MVP. Obviously, you have Russell Wilson, who's there now, who's won his Super Bowl, had a prove-it year. We'll get to that in a moment. Obviously, Deshaun, who has a lot to prove. We'll get to that coming up. But, the Joe Burrow's led a team to a Super Bowl, back-to-back AFC. Yeah, it's going to be a wild Hard Knocks as far as that's concerned. No doubt about it. The Browns one's interesting, not because I'm a Browns fan, but because – people are just going to be hate watching that.
Oh, yeah.
People are going to be hate watching that. And I'm very well aware of that. People could be just tuning in. Any Deshaun clip that is him in the training room, ice in the shoulder, you just know what's going to come with that stuff. We ain't stupid.
No, yeah, that's the easiest gimme of all time. I mean, you guys doing your preseason photo shoot in what looked like the lobby of a jail wasn't exactly the best.
Did they really?
Saved a lot of the Deshaun pictures sitting on a wire bench with a flashing light above his head for when he throws a couple picks in the middle of the season. So those will come back out. You'll see him later for sure.
Chow time coming up here, nonetheless. No. Anyways. All right. So with that, we'll get to some Red stuff coming up here in a moment. NBA Finals Game 5 coming up later on tonight. A gentleman's sweep potentially. We'll talk about whether a Game 6, maybe a Game 7 potentially coming, or is the NBA season going to wrap up coming up here later on tonight. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. I swear the WNBA, if they want to just maintain being interesting. Just have the Sky and the Fever play every night.
Every night.
By the way, the Sky, that's the team that Angel Reese plays on, and the Fever, that's the team that Caitlin Clark. Yeah, just wanted to clear that up, but it is what it is. So they should do a Hard Knocks just with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese's teams.
They should.
That's the only way. I mean, I would care for that at least.
I think that would probably get more viewership than the rest of the WNBA games.
My favorite is the WNBA media getting all mad, like, we're talking about the bad teams. We should be talking about the good teams. I'm like, well, then trade Caitlin Clark to a good team.
Or make the Fever a good team.
Like,
give them an easy schedule, like Coward said.
The media is driving me nuts. Like, they're trying to tell you what you need to be interested in, and that's not how this works. Like, Adam Schefter and these guys, I know you're down on that. I don't mean to keep bringing him up. But I'm just like, he's like, the NFL guy, right?
Right,
like,
for sure.
Brian Windhorst. Brian Windhorst isn't telling you what you need to be interested in. Schefter's not telling you what you need to be interested in, all right? You look at Tim Kirkshin and the guys for base. They're not telling you what you need to be interested in. They're talking about what you're interested in.
Right.
People get mad, like, what was the Red Sox and Yankees on last night or the night before? Yeah, I think it was on last night, Sunday Night Baseball. So I'm a program director for our ESPN affiliate in Dayton, okay? So when we carry Sunday Night Baseball, people get pissed because all you guys carry, as if I make the decision, but all you guys carry is Yankees and Red Sox. You think that there's just some moron in a room that's like, well, I like Yankees and Red Sox, so let's just put them out there. No, you, me, baseball fans, that's the most listened to, that's the most watched, that's the most interesting rivalry in baseball. Now, maybe not to me right now.
Right.
The Yankees, Red Sox has lost, but that still garners the most viewership, ears and eyes. So that's why they keep throwing the same game out there, Sunday Night Baseball.
For sure.
Because people that know what they're doing know to keep giving you what you want. People get mad because the Cowboys, that's all First Take talks about. That's all Skip Bayless talks about on Fox. That's not because that's all they want to talk about. That's what you want to listen to them and watch them talk about. You as a Bengals fan, get your feelings hurt a lot.
Oh, yeah.
You would love to tune into First Take and have it be oh, man, Joe Burrow did the cutest thing at practice the other day. He pretended to be an official, and he tossed his towel in the air. You would love that.
I would.
You would just be cheesing from ear to ear. But guess what? That's not a popular thing that people want across the country, so they would rather argue about Dak Prescott's contract again.
And that's fair.
Even after he got the extension. But what about the next contract? They keep it going. So the WNBA media needs to stop telling us what we need to be interested in. I don't care about an undefeated Connecticut team that's not Gino Ariema's UConn Husky team. I don't care. I don't know who Asia Wilson is outside of the fact that a few years ago she was dating a Dayton Flyer and would show up to UD Arena every once in a while. The only way I knew who that was is because of that. Not because I hate women or hate women's sports. It just no one really follows the sport. So stop telling and criticizing fans what they need to be interested in and start leaning into what they're interested in, and then people might actually give a damn even more.
Perfectly said.
So, nonetheless, this is not the We Hate Women's Sports show, I promise you, but it's the We Like Common Sense show, and hopefully we can keep that going. But this is where common sense probably takes a break. Because anything I have to put out quarterback-wise, it usually is met with a little bit. But I'm fascinated to see if there's an individual quarterback that's on my list. I really am curious if you have him on yours. I think I'm pretty sure that there's going to be an overlap for some of ours as far as that's concerned. But right now, what time we got? It's 1:15. We got plenty of time. This works out perfect, actually. So the top 5 NFL players with the most to prove heading into this season. I do need to ask you, is yours nothing but quarterbacks?
I have one non-quarterback, and he comes in at 5. So my top 4 are quarterbacks.
So I did an honorable mention, but they are all quarterbacks.
Okay.
And for people, I mean, could have just called it top 5 quarterbacks with the most to prove. But the bottom line is that's the one position. Like when the Bengals drafted Jamar Chase years ago, let's say he turned into a bust, it wouldn't have altered the direction of the franchise, right? It wouldn't have altered. It would have, like, they're still building around Joe Burrow. If Jamar Chase...
But you're talking to a team that took John Ross and had him bust, or that set the team back a couple years.
But
Like
because
I
who
think
was your
if you would have went... Well, I guess that's fair, too. But if you would have went Jamar over Penny Sewell, and Penny Sewell turns out to be what he's been in Detroit, an all-pro tackle with one of the biggest extensions we've ever seen to an O-lineman, and Jamar's a bust, I don't. It's hard to bounce back from that, especially because of how split the fan base was going into that draft. I think just his case in particular, it would have been a really, really tough
Where
beat
were
for
you
the
during
Bengals.
that time? Were you Team Sewell or Team Chase?
I was Team Chase. I was Team Chase all the way through. I said it doesn't matter who's blocking if Jamar Chase has 1,300 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, and that's exactly what happened when we made a Super Bowl. So
Remember when they lost the Super Bowl? Remember how they lost?
that's true,
If
but they
you
wouldn't have
would've
even got
just
there
a
with.
second.
They wouldn't
we
have
can
even
do this all
got there.
day. It's set, point.
That's true.
Back and
That's
forth.
true.
But that was one of my favorite. That was a great offseason. I kind of miss when our teams are bad. It makes June and all this stuff a little bit more interesting. But
That's true.
Like, I hate how, well, we're good. You guys are all confident. Makes me sick. Makes me sick. I have to keep reminding you that you're the second worst defense in the NFL last year statistically. That's like the new allegedly.
And we still just don't care.
No, and I'm trying so damn hard. You get upset at a damn picture. I throw out facts that should bother you. You're like, don't care. We didn't add any major player defense, but we're counting on rookies. It's okay. I can't wait for the fall, dude. You're gonna hate me.
I can't either.
Fall. Oh, it's gonna be awesome.
At least we're gonna be on the same side for college.
No, OH, baby.
And
we need each other to defend.
Right, the rest of this office.
So, nonetheless, all right. Top 5 players with the most to prove, and the reason so I used Jamar as an example for me, saying that if he's a bust, you have to still, you have to adjust, and might have to make up for that.
No,
but it's
right.
not going to totally change the direction of the franchise. You just have to. But if Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick, ends up being a bust, man, now you're set back for quite a bit because you go as your quarterback goes, right? So that's why there's always the quarterbacks at the top of the list of any list of who is facing the most pressure. So that's why I have a lot of quarterbacks on mine. So I'll go ahead and we'll get started. So top 5 NFL players with the most to prove. All 5 of mine are quarterbacks. We'll start at number 5 on my list, of course, Russell Wilson. I don't think that this is a hot take. I don't think that this is a surprise. Russell Wilson, to me, is one of the top 5 players in the NFL with the most to prove this upcoming season, mainly because of the fact that he could totally alter the perception of who he is. I mean, look, he had an unceremonious exit from a team that he helped win a Super Bowl. He totally got disrespected in Denver, or did he? That's what he's having a chance to prove right now, and he ends up in a place that many people believe if you can't get it done with Mike Tomlin, if you can't get it done with one of the best defenses in the NFL, if you can't get it done in Pittsburgh, then you're done. I think that Russell Wilson, this could be his last year in the NFL. I don't think his ego and his personality, I don't think he's a backup quarterback. So I think this one-year deal in Pittsburgh, to me, he has to prove that he's still a high-level playing quarterback or just a quarterback that can at least run an offense to allow your defense to win you games. If he could do that, he has some life left in the NFL. But if he is what he was that last year in Seattle when they didn't want him back, if he is who he is, the last couple years in Denver and they didn't want him back, if he's that guy, he might be done. That's why I think he has a ton to prove as far as that's concerned. Now, Jacob, do you want to go 5-5 or whole list to whole list, or how do you want to do this?
I think we go 5-5.
5-5? Okay. So Russell Wilson comes in at number 5 on my list. Coming in at number 4, I know this sounds kind of wild, okay? But I'm going to put a rookie quarterback on this, and here's why. I have Caleb Williams, okay? I have Caleb Williams at number 4. Now, if something doesn't go well this season, it's not as if he's kicked out of the NFL. It's not as if the Bears are going to pick a quarterback next year. Well, maybe, depending on how bad it could potentially be. But it's not often. Like, Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback that everyone looked at and said was a can't-miss prospect, right? Now, he hasn't looked as lights out as a Joe Burrow or the other elite Patrick Mahomes or these other guys. But at the end of the day, it is a situation where when he's still a very, very good quarterback. Caleb Williams, I think, is going to be very, very good. I'm just curious if he could be that elite level quarterback. But the reason I think that there's going to be a prove-it year for him, a lot of pressure for him, and the NFL should be pulling for this. I love what the Bears did. Not many people give the Bears a lot of compliments, and I'm never giving them compliments because they just seem to never be able to figure it out. But kudos to them for being willing to go and get a Keenan Allen, for having DJ Moore, for drafting Odunze. He's going to have 3 elite potentially 3 very good wide receivers. Let's just put it that way. Keenan Allen, a hell of a talent. Okay, you have DJ Moore, and then you draft what could potentially be the best receiver in that draft. So we'll see. Or second best, Marvin Harrison Jr. Don't mean to disrespect him, but the bottom line is that he has every weapon imaginable. You have DeAndre Swift at running back. They added some big pieces on defense. Caleb Williams should not be treated with kid gloves. He should not be viewed as, just a rookie quarterback. He's expected to win, and I think he has a lot to prove this year. I think that if he wants a chance to be a C.J. Stroud or to be looked at like Joe Burrow was after that first year, despite getting injured in Week 11 against Washington, I think everyone knew that the Bengals had their quarterback, right? Think that's why there's so much on the line with him. I think you could even kind of put a tie between him and J.J. McCarthy because, hey, he has Addison, he has Justin Jefferson, of course, obviously a very good tight end. But it is interesting. I'm fascinated. I hope that both those quarterbacks have great years because what I want to see is I'm tired of teams with the number 1 overall pick thinking, let's find out if we have our quarterback, then we'll add, basically throwing in the throwing in the towel on the first season. Or, no, we're going to give our rookie quarterback every weapon imaginable so we don't potentially waste 1 year of the 4-year rookie deal. I have Caleb Williams coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, Aaron Rodgers. I have Aaron Rodgers coming in at number 3, and simply put, I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. I love that he just absolutely ticks people off. I love that he speaks up. I love that he's the most interesting personality in the NFL. Not even close. I mean, this is a guy that we were debating whether he was going to run for president or at least run for office in some capacity. I mean, look, we have guys like, man, is he going to retire or is he going to play this season? Is he going to, run, politically, or is he going to play quarterback this season? He's a very interesting guy. He goes on ayahuasca retreats, which, by the way, it sounds like that is the reported reason why he missed.
He's on one now.
Mandatory camp with the Jets. So the reason I think it's a prove it year is because he's always gotten away with this stuff because he's played at an MVP level and his teams have won. Now, he hasn't won a Super Bowl in over a decade, but wins back-to-back MVPs. Okay, does a lot of great things with the Packers. Always a noisy quarterback. So it doesn't surprise me that he's noisy here, but it's going to be even louder if the Jets don't live up to expectations. Plus, it's in New York, so the expectations are significantly higher than in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So to me, I have Aaron Rodgers coming in at number 3. He has to go out there and prove that he's still that MVP-level quarterback. And if he does that, I don't care if he goes on an ayahuasca retreat Monday through Friday. Just be there Sunday, help your team win. That's all that matters when it's all said and done. Here we go. Mr. Joe Burrow coming in at number 2. Now, when I say prove it, it's not as if, oh, man, if he has a bad year, that's it, the Bengals move on. That's not what I'm saying, not even close, okay? But I am one that despite, as Jacob likes to say, stirring the pot, this, that, and the other, Joe Burrow has earned every single dollar that he was given. Not even, wasn't even up for debate. I didn't even think twice of trying to spin it in a negative light. But earning it and proving that you're worth it are two different things. You get that contract and, super banged up in camp last year. You try to play through it. The team struggles early on. You play through that. Then you get another injury. You're, for the second time in 4 years, out for the second half of the season. I mean, that's not a good trend right now. Your best ability is your availability. And skill set, we know Joe Burrow, top 2 quarterback in the NFL. I have him right behind Patrick Mahomes, of course. But, again, that's when he's out there. What makes Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen so significant, not better, that's a bad way to put it, but what makes them so more significantly interesting is the fact that they don't miss games. Patrick Mahomes doesn't miss games. He plays banged up. All right, he might be pulled out for a half, but he doesn't miss games. Josh Allen doesn't miss games. Joe Burrow misses a lot of games, and I think that this upcoming season, they did a lot. I mean, they bring T back, and they might lose him for absolutely nothing. That's a gamble right there. Their cap space is just continuing to shrink and shrink. Salary cap, that's going to continue to shrink as they have to extend and pay guys, and they have to rely on the draft a lot more. The bottom line is the pressure's picking up, and Joe Burrow's no longer a feel-good story in the NFL. Now he's going to be looked at as, like most quarterbacks, hey, there's expectations to win. And if you're not at least in the AFC Championship game or at least in the divisional round of the playoffs, there's going to be people that criticize him and say, hey, you got that money. Where are you? That's why I have him at number 2. It's more so about staying healthy because I know the dude can play. I'm avoiding eye contact with my guy Jacob over here. And then number 1, no surprise here. I'm not here to argue with anybody. It does come down to Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has the most to prove of any quarterback that is in the National Football League because, as most of you have talked about, he's the first quarterback to ever get fully guaranteed money. And I don't know why that's so. I mean, if the whole contract's guaranteed and it's only $10 million more than your precious Joe Burrow's getting paid, you're mad because that forced the Bengals to have to do it. So what? Someone was going to do it eventually, so why not be Deshaun? The point is he has to prove that he was worth it. Because to the Browns' credit, people say the Browns is the Browns. Browns is the Browns is continuing to get quarterbacks that just don't cut it. Deshaun had already proven that he could play the position at such a high level. That's why I had no problem with the Browns doing it. A lot of people said, well, he's a scummy person. Well, there's a lot of scummy people on a lot of these rosters in the NFL that we compartmentalize of how we're going to go about cheering on our teams, and I can name at least 5 guys on the Bengals over the last 5 years that you guys have done it with yourself. So I say that because with Deshaun, it all comes down to, can you stay healthy? Can you play? When you are out there, can you be the guy that dominated the Ravens in the second half? Can you be that guy? All right, when you are healthy, can you be the guy that you were against the Tennessee Titans, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and absolutely demolished the Tennessee Titans last year? Okay, the reason I bring up the Titans, it's not like that's a huge win, right? But that was like that breakout game for him as a Cleveland Brown, and then he misses the next month after. It's like, man, you can't compound back-to-back good games. You want to see it, right? He has that great game against the Ravens. I'm jacked. I can't wait to go into work the next day to talk about that great second half against the Ravens, and then guess what happens? We spend the entire damn show talking about he's out for the rest of the season. What are the Browns going to do? Like, I need to see back-to-back performances like that. We have seen great performances. Even week 1 against Cleveland, or against Cincinnati, wasn't a great performance statistically, but man, he had 2 touchdowns. He found a way in those elements. I mean, you guys remember how horrible the elements were in that, in that game. Found ways to force his way into the end zone. Stop it with the jokes. Force his way to the end zone, all right, to get the job done. So to me, Deshaun Watson, you got that fully guaranteed contract. You have a loaded roster. You have one of the best defenses in the NFL. You have one of the best run games in the NFL, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Very, very good wide receiving core. Really no excuse. Deshaun Watson, it's a prove it or lose it type of season for him, and I'm really curious where the Browns go if it is another bumpy ride for Deshaun Watson. That's my top 5.
I agree with most, and you'll see when I get into mine here in a second. There's going to be some overlap, but no quarterbacks on your lists are in the same position on my list. Just little nugget there. I changed my fifth. My fifth spot, I didn't have a quarterback at first. I had Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has 1 year left. He has an out on his contract after this year. And obviously paying Jalen Waddle as much as they just did, and Tyreek Hill obviously threatening retirement just a couple years ago. I think he does have to prove that he's still a top-shelf receiver for them to pick up that $30 million option next season. But I digress. Kenner made a great point that quarterbacks are the most valuable, quarterbacks have the most pressure, so all 5 on my 5 are going to end up being quarterbacks. Coming in at number 5, C.J. Stroud. Look, I understand that CJ might not have the most pressure in a traditional sense as everyone else, but the Texans' over-under for win total right now is 10.5. They're projected to win the AFC South by 2 or 3 games, depending on what books you look at. That seems to me that's crazy. When the Colts had Anthony Richardson healthy last year, they were incredibly competitive. The Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, incredibly competitive, started the season 9-3, and obviously believe in him enough to give him $55 million. I think that division's going to be competitive. The AFC as a whole, incredibly competitive. CJ Stroud, top 10 odds to win MVP. I just think the level that fans and media are expecting him to play at in his second season in the league, some fault of his own, doing podcast tours and such, talking about other players in the league, being better or worse than you after just one season. And I won't hold that against him. That's a new era of player in the league, getting your face out there, getting some clips out there in the offseason. So I still love CJ Stroud. I'm a big fan, but I think the expectations for him this season have grown to such a degree that the pressure is just, it cannot be ignored with CJ Stroud in Houston in just his second season in the league. Number 4 for me is Deshaun Watson. Much lower on my list than he was on Kenner. I had him number 1, and I have him for the same reasons. Obviously, a fully guaranteed contract. He hasn't quite lived up to it. He hasn't been healthy. But I think the level of play for people to be okay with Deshaun Watson is just so low at this point. I mean, we saw him be incredible in Houston, an MVP candidate, a top 3-5 quarterback in the entire league to earn this contract with the Browns. And then since he got to Cleveland, he's been nothing close to that quarterback. So I think if he can be 50, 60% of what he was in Houston, people will get off Deshaun's back. And that's the only reason I don't have him higher on my list, is just the bar for him to be okay, I think in everyone's eyes, is just much, much lower. At number 3, I have Mr. Big Money himself, not Trevor Lawrence. I have Jared Goff. Jared Goff got $53 million this year to be the quarterback of a Lions team who he led to the NFC Championship last year. He proved that he can do it, that he can win those playoff games, and he won the NFC North, breaking their 30-year drought. So kudos to him. He's obviously proven that he is a bona fide starter in this league, but now he's taking another step. As we see with these guys when they get $50 million a year, you're talked about in a different light. So now Jared Goff is not going to be compared to that second tier of quarterbacks. He's going to be compared to the first. And I don't know that he's ever really lived up to that level of quarterback play. So I'm interested to see how the media and fan takes on him turns now that he's getting top quarterback money for the first time in his career. They have weapons. Amon-Ra St. Brown that Jameson Williams drafted in the first round a couple of years ago, Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round last year, Sam Laporta in the third round. There are little to no excuses for Jared Goff. They just paid him, so he doesn't have that big weight on his back of securing a contract and being locked down somewhere long term. He has that security, so he has no option but to play well this season. My number 2 is someone who just got long-term security, someone who should be set for years to come, but to much of our surprise, he was not. Kirk Cousins is my number 2 quarterback that has to prove it this season. I mean, you look at what he did. He signed a 4-year contract with over $100 million guaranteed in Atlanta this year. He would have been nowhere near this list if they didn't take someone, Michael Penix, out of Washington at 8 in the draft. With a GM like Terry Fontenot, who already has a lot of eyes on him, talking about a hot seat. If Kirk Cousins plays poorly to start this year, just 1 year into that massive 4-year contract, you're going to have people calling for Michael Penix to take over. A Falcons roster that is very competitive, has great weapons, a defense who was swelling at the end of last year, playing much, much better. They play in a very weak NFC South division. They should compete to win it. They should compete for a playoff spot. I expect them to. I expect Kirk to play well and somewhat match that statistical output that he put up in Minnesota. But a couple bad games here or there, they're going to be calling for his head in Atlanta, asking for Michael Penix. I think the pressure on him is as big as almost anyone in the league. And then number one, obviously not left off my list, it is Joe Burrow.
Oh, wow.
I think he's distantly number one most pressure in the NFL this year. And look, we know what he can do when he's healthy, but at some point as a Bengals fan, it gets really, really old saying we've been to the AFC Championship both years he's been healthy. I would just love him to be healthy. And at some point, I'm not one that hangs on the injuries and says, we can get into the injury prone or not discussion if we want to, but I think it's just he needs to prove that he can be out there for 17 games back-to-back years. And obviously this will just be the start of that after missing so much time last year, but he needs to be out there and he needs to play at a high level, for a multitude of games in a row so we can prove that, hey, $55 million 5 years for this guy was not an overpay. Obviously when he's out there playing, it's not an overpay, but if he's not going to be on the field, it'll certainly be looked that way by revisionist history. So I think Joe Burrow has the most pressure by any quarterback in the league this year by quite a wide margin.
All right, agree, disagree. First of all, I did not expect you to have Joe Burrow in there, so that's but yeah, I think all your talking points are very similar as far as the Joe Burrow discussion is concerned. I didn't throw any shade at Joey B. I mean, I know when he's healthy, that's why the whole Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes thing picked up, is because everyone's like, oh, he is, they can go and not just beat the Chiefs but win. At Arrowhead. That's why the Burrowhead, joke started and all this stuff, is because he's the only quarterback that's really proven that he is not intimidated by him, right? Like Tom Brady is the only quarterback that consistently beat Patrick Mahomes early on, and he's out of the league. So it's kind of like Joe Burrow that's looked at as the guy to go up against him to kind of slow him down as far as that's concerned. The one that you surprised me with but brought up great points was the C.J. Stroud one. What I love about C.J. Stroud is the fact that he puts out a lot of content that usually you don't get until guys retire. Right. And then when the guys retire, I work with Keith Byers over in Dayton, and one thing that he always talks about is, sometimes it's tough. He'll give out really, hot takes on stuff, or he'll give critical opinions on Ryan Day and others, and then he'll show up to their practice and have to face them after. And that's a tough thing to do, but KB just has to show up and talk to them and be KB, right? He doesn't have to go and perform at a high level. CJ Stroud, I love the content he puts out when he's putting out his top 5 QB list. Now you're a little salty because he didn't have your guy Joey B in there. I know why you didn't.
I watched the whole clip. He said if Burrow was healthy, he would have been in his top 5. So he gave him what he was due.
But no, in all seriousness, when you put out lists like that, it's not the guys you put on the list, it's the guys you left off, right? So if Houston and the Bengals run into each other, Joe Burrow is always looking for something to be motivated by, right? I remember he left me off his list, so now I'm going to go torch him and blah, 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 blah. But that stuff matters. That's not a joke at Joey B. That stuff matters. Athletes are always looking for motivational factors, and he talks a lot. And I love that. But I don't think we've seen how that can impact things yet, because when he's a feel-good story, rookie of the year, QB offensive play of the year, whatever, when he does all that stuff and he's winning the division when they're not supposed to after being the number one overall or one of the top picks, then they get a win in the playoffs against the freaking Browns. When they do all these things, it's great. Winning silences all, but when the Texans get through a little rough patch, all right, and he's going on podcasts and he's having beef with some players, that's where it could pick up the pressure. So I agree with you. I never thought of it from that perspective. I love that about C.J. Stroud, but I could definitely see that being used against him, no doubt about it.
Another name that wasn't on either of our lists that the chat has since brought up, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert finally gets rid of the Brandon Staley excuse. Jim Harbaugh in town, unanimously viewed as one of the top coaches in the league, just right back coming out of college. And Herbert right up there with Goff and Burrow, and with all that big money, over $50 million a year for Herbert. He still hasn't ever advanced in the playoffs. We know about his statistical output, but he's battled injuries as well. Justin Herbert's certainly facing a lot of pressure this season as well.
See, I think the coaching change helps. You could say that makes it worse, but they unloaded Keenan out, they got rid of all his guys.
Right.
So, that's where I'm at with him as far as, I think he might get a little bit of a break.
That's fair.
For 1 year.
That's
but
true.
I do know that the injury, because he's faced a lot of injuries, not necessarily himself, although he did miss a little bit of last year, of course, but like his guys around him. There's a stretch last year where he played back-to-back games with nothing but walk-ons for the Chargers, wide receiver, that is. So it is kind of one of those situations that I'm sitting back like, I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass. Lamar, this has been a very silent offseason for him. We didn't have him in that, but it's like it's getting to a point where I don't really care about it. He's going to get that NBA treatment where I don't really care about MVPs for you anymore. I don't really care about scoring titles anymore.
Yeah.
That's what we do with the NBA, where we're like, we don't care about scoring titles. We're tired of you winning the MVPs. Like LeBron got to that point. It's like, okay, cool, but are you going to win a championship? The Ravens and Lamar, I think, we'll be talking about Lamar at this point a year from now. If they don't win the Super Bowl, saying, okay, we're bored with the MVP stuff. We're bored with the, oh, cool, you can make plays with your legs thing. Like, are you going to win a Super Bowl? Because that's really what it's going to come down to. Two, I think, is facing pressure. You had Tyreek Hill in there. I'd put Stephon Diggs, too.
Fair.
Because
1 year deal in Houston. 1
year deal in Houston, playing with a great quarterback. You're playing with Josh Allen. We're gonna, I think there's pressure there where, okay, was it Josh Allen or was it you? And if he has a great year at Stroud, then he'll be forgiven. But if he has an average year, then I think people are going to say, oh, it wasn't Josh Allen. It was you that was the problem, and kind of go from there. But, yeah, I like the Herbert. I understand that, no doubt. But I think we're a year from where that pressure really picks up. Like the getting paid thing, it's not going to stop people from really, putting that up there as far as that goes.
I think at some point with Herbert, too, you just have to, I hate saying ignore, but ignore the game results. Since he got to the league, his offense has scored more points than any other quarterback's offense in the entire league, and his defense has allowed 2 more than that. So at some point, what more do you want him to do? Another name thrown up in the chat here, Dak Prescott, absolutely. Whoever's the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys will always be top 10 in pressure, so that's another name that fits in there right as well. And, it comes back to where we started this segment where you said it's going to be quarterbacks, and that's what it is. The quarterbacks get all the credit when you win and all the blame when you lose. So the quarterback of whoever's picking number 1 in the draft next year at the end of the season is also should have been on this list. So it's just the quarterbacks, and it goes directly with how you play on the field, and pressure will move all season long, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Jordan Love, we could throw out every quarterback's facing pressure, right? I don't want Jordan Love on my list, but that's another one. Like the Packers, I've said this, he's a dangerous quarterback. I've always said the most dangerous quarterback is the quarterback that's good enough to win your regular season games, good enough to keep you relevant, but also be the same head. He can give you 2 different headlines. The headline that's making you relevant, but he's also the reason why you're not relevant. That's Jordan Love. You as a Bengals fan, I think know this very well. I think Andy Dalton fit that perfectly. Like Andy Dalton, there were a lot of teams that would have lined up to get Andy Dalton at quarterback to get that type of production, right? It doesn't mean that you strive for that, but God would take that. I mean, as a Browns fan, looking how bad they were at quarterback forever, while Bengals fans were crapping all over Dalton, I'm like, man, I think the Browns with Josh Gordon and some of those teams would have loved to have an Andy Dalton just to stabilize some things a little bit, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. But the Bengals get to the Super Bowl, to the playoffs so often with Dalton, it was no longer about getting to the playoffs. It was like, oh, crap, we can't see us going to that next level with you at quarterback. And that's why that game against the Steelers, when everything crumbled on them, with the McCarron thing, I said, you know what? I was like, the best thing that probably happened to the Bengals was that crumble, because what you didn't want was the McCarron situation where they wouldn't have won because of McCarron, because he's better than Dalton, but he would have got all the pressure. Dalton would have got all the crap for that. So bottom line is, it's a dangerous quarterback to have. You either want a really, really bad quarterback or a Joe Burrow.
Exactly.
Jordan Love, I don't like that. I wouldn't. I don't. You know what I mean? Like
Trace is a Packers fan.
Trace is a Packers fan. And he may. I don't know his take on Jordan Love.
I'm a big Jordan Love guy, so I'm not quite with you on this.
I'm not there yet.
I think he's pushing top 10 quarterback going into the season for me.
Okay, and it's and if he is, then good for the Packers.
Right.
My gosh, because if this does work, that organization is immune from any criticism when it comes to quarterback moving forward.
For sure.
You look at their lineage of quarterbacks and how long and what they've been getting a Super Bowl from pretty much every one of them, MVPs from every single one of them. Brett Favre, great dude, by the way. And just say, how people are, people love, judging people. I'm just saying, great dude, But bottom line is, you think they're void from any criticism if he ends up.
I would agree. The last name I want to throw out there, I haven't really seen in the chat. Obviously, we didn't mention it. Should Jalen Hurts be on that list? 2 years ago, an MVP-esque season, leads this team to the Super Bowl, outplays Patrick Mahomes. Last year, they go, I think it was 10-1 they started the season, and then they end up not even winning the division, going down to Tampa Bay, losing to the NFC South champ Buccaneers in the first round of the playoffs. Hurts fell off the face of the earth. You could say it was injuries. You could say it wasn't. He was never on the injury report. He played every game. Look, I think he needs to be high on that list. He's someone in that $50 million range that I really don't know if he's the guy. I mean, even Trevor Lawrence, to a degree, you can do the debate whether he deserved 55 or not, but I don't think there's really a debate that he's the quarterback of the future in Jacksonville, whether he's worth that or not. I really do wonder about Jalen Hurts. I think it takes one bad season, two more bad seasons, and you're looking at how you can cut your losses with that contract. I mean, he's a guy to me that never really wowed me with his arm, had one really NFL season in college, NFL talent-wise season in college when he transferred to Oklahoma. Got drafted in the middle of the second round. I don't really see a whole lot out of Jalen Hurts that makes me believe he's a top 10 quarterback in the league and he's being paid like it. So I think he needs to be on that list as well.
Yeah, because they're in a situation where they also have 2 wide receivers that are in the top 5.
Right.
With A.J. Brown.
And a running back who's in the top 5.
Yeah, so they have a lot of money. To their credit, they felt we have our quarterback. So if we have to go into cap hell for a bit to keep talent around him, let's go hard in the paint for a couple more years. Because I don't freak out about teams that go crazy with roster contracts and stuff, because you can unload guys fairly easily.
Right.
Like with the Rams, they have no first-round draft picks. And you know what? The second that they feel like they're losing control, they'll trade Cooper Kupp and they'll get some draft picks back. All right, Puka Nacua, if they have to pull the trigger on moving him, which I know they don't want to, they could do that. Aaron Donald was always that ace in the hole if he didn't retire and they wanted to move. The Browns are in the same boat. You mean like if this Deshaun thing really does, if the blank hits the fan and they've totally messed up, they'll trade Myles Garrett and get a crap ton of picks back. They'll trade, they got Newsome, but they'll trade Ward. They got guys that they're going to get a ton of picks back, and then they'll mess something up all over again, right? But like, you know what I mean? Like this idea that people are in cap hell, the Eagles can get out of this,
right,
but they can't get out of it smoothly. So if Hurts is not the guy, they have to start over and move guys to reset their draft picks as far as that's concerned. But the NFL, it's not for long for success, but it's not for long being down in the dirt either. Now, I know I'm talking to all Bengals and Browns fans. I know we know how bad it can get. But at the same time, I feel like the NFL I don't know what's changed over the last 5-6 years where, the Houston Texans have rebuilt twice in the last 6 years. I always take shots at the Pittsburgh Steelers. They give Mike Tomlin that dang contract extension. I'm not advocating that you fire him. I kind of like Mike Tomlin, kind of, right? But at the same time, the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars, they've been a playoff team, and they had the number 1 overall pick or a top 2 pick and back to the playoffs twice with the win since the Steelers have last won a playoff game. Bad teams have routed the Steelers multiple times. All right? Like, that's wild to me as far as that's concerned. So if you have to reset, it doesn't take long. The Houston Texans, I thought they were going to be in agony for years. They get C.J. Stroud and boom. Like, it's kind of wild.
Well, I think one of the worst quotes of all time is after the Bengals beat the Bills in Buffalo 2 years ago, and Brandon Beane, their GM, said, "We don't ever want to suck bad enough to get a Jamar Chase." Well, sucking bad enough to pick in the top 5 is how you get out of rebuilds. That's how you don't go 9-8 for a decade. Like, and not to mention, you picked Josh Allen at 7. Like, you did suck that bad.
I really wish we were doing this show together during the coin flip drama.
Oh, man.
Dude, were you guys together for the DeMar Hamlin stuff? And not being – now, like, that was one of the most over-dramatized things in the history of sports. I wasn't team Skip Bayless, but I was team stop pretending to be fake outraged by Skip Bayless. Like, he doesn't do a good job of reading the room, but you know how many people were sitting at home probably saying the same exact thing he was, but now everyone's doing the holier-than-thou thing of, how dare you?
Yeah.
People make me sick, dude. People make me nauseous when it comes to that stuff, but I would have loved to work with you guys during that stretch. Like,
yeah, I wasn't here, but I was in the stadium when it happened with a bunch of my buddies, and that was the most confused I've ever been at a sporting event.
Well, no, horrible thing that happened. Don't I'm talking about like the fallout. As
far
as
yeah,
how the
absolutely.
league handled that game.
Not having to track to the 2nd seed. I mean, what a ridiculous resolution that is.
So we had so many Bengals fans call in to say, "Well, we had the lead, so we should just win."
That was, I think, the dumbest argument of all. It was 3 drives into the game. Yeah. We went down and scored. And then I did love when we went up to Buffalo later in the year, went down and scored on the first drive. It was all right. We're good. We did it again.
Now.
Just stop it. Yeah, 28. We've never seen a comeback from there.
But then the coin flip thing. I mean, my goodness.
Mixon pulling that out of his glove was the greatest thing ever.
Oh, but you guys left Petty.
Oh, yeah.
You guys, that's why I'm only dying laughing, because you're bringing up something that I completely forgot about. I'm like, look at you just bringing up sore wounds, dude. Like, what the heck? But yeah, it is what it is, dude. And then, yeah, but the coin flip celebration, I probably would have liked it if my team did it.
That's fair.
But rolled my eyes big time, as far as what else was there? What else? I know there was some other petty stuff. I'm going to have to come up with my top five most petty Bengals moments in the Joe Burrow era.
Oh boy,
I can come up with.
You think you have some good ones?
I'll come up with it. The top 5 most petty moments in the Joe Burrow era. I think we might need 10, maybe 15.
Expand that list.
No, nonetheless. All right, Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett here. Again, grip it and rip it. A lot of grip it and rip it jokes in there.
There's a lot.
Yeah,
I would say the majority of today's chats.
Good for them.
I love it. I mean, it's.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is as far as that's concerned. But no, nonetheless, just real quick, because there's some stuff on the rundown that we're not going to get to today, which that's a good thing. I've told when I got to sit in on some ESPN shows in New York one time, and they said like their program, if they have a 2-hour show, they'll have three 15 to 20 minute segments, okay? And so they'll have 9 total segments, but they'll have 15 topics heading into a show. And a bad show means you got to all the topics.
Right.
Because they have a meter that follows like the engagement of the show and all this stuff. So if like they're following that, if you get to everything, that means nothing's stuck. So whatever. But so I've always said, okay, if you don't get to everything, that's a good thing. Plus it's June, so you roll crap over the next show, right?
Right.
Like and who knows what petty stuff you're going to come up with between now and when. Your feelings get hurt a lot.
They do. They do.
You're an emotional guy. You're an emotional fan base. Being a Browns fan is hard on me, right? Like,
That's
that
fair.
Sounded weird, but you guys know what I mean. Just saying. Sorry for the families watching at home.
No, if it's grip it and rip, it's a kid's show. That's what we always say here. It's a kid's show.
Is it?
Probably not.
Probably not. I've been on my best behavior so far, as far as that's concerned. But nonetheless, all right. So let me see what else we still have. I mean, I know. Was there anything? Recap really quick off the bench from today, because I caught some. I caught some of the stuff that you guys were talking about before, but just some takeaways from off the bench today, some of the talking points.
We really went with how important this Pirates series is for the Reds. I mean, going into Milwaukee and competing for 3 games against a team that simply owns you over the last however long, this Pirates series is crucial. I mean, you're 2-3 in your last 5 games against the Guardians and the Brewers, which if you look at how those games were played, 2-3 is a pretty good spot to be sitting in. So to go out there and beat the Pirates, win this series, and get back to 500 over this stretch when you're coming home for the Red Sox this weekend, that's just absolutely crucial to stay in the mix in the Central and keep clawing back in the National League, where there's all but 2 teams within a game of the last wild card spot, within a game and a half, of the last wild card spot. Just the Marlins and the Marlins and one other team are completely out of it, but everyone else in the National League within 2 games of that last wild card spot. So, really exciting brand of baseball now. And we talk about how, there was some negative opinions when they expanded the wild card to 3 wild card teams, but now you have, 15 teams in the National League still watching their games. I mean, if there was only 2 wild card spots, the Reds season would have ended in May when we said it was over. Now you've been able to claw yourself back and get into a position to play for that 3rd wild card spot. So, if the Reds can keep playing 500 baseball up until the All-Star break for about, a month and a half now, we could be talking about a team who's really in the playoff mix coming down the final stretch.
So I like, and I was pulling this up because they did some of their playoff odds, or just, Major League. I mean, again, we're pretty much through the spring. I think, when's the first day of summer? Aren't we coming up on that? Is that today? I mean, it's hot as hell outside.
It's always 21st,
so
right?
So it's coming up. So like spring's wrapping up. So they put out their kind of spring recap numbers and stuff, and just kind of the odds for the playoffs and this, that, and the other. So of course, as I'm stalling trying to find it because my phone's not loading that fast. Oh, here we go. So like the Reds, I think are like plus 240 to make the playoffs or something crazy like that. Which is wild because you sit back and you look at them right now, and it's just kind of one of those things. I'm like, are they a playoff team? They're an interesting team because you could make money off of them making the playoffs if that's the case, right? They're not a guarantee.
280 to make
so
the
it's
playoffs.
280. Good call. Good way to be on your feet there. Good job. But yeah, 280 as far as that's concerned to make the playoffs. And you look at the Cubs at plus 155. The Pirates are plus 550, and you just start to look at some of these. It's interesting as far as how that's concerned. Now, I like what you talked about. Some people complained when you went to the 3 teams to make the playoffs. It does make it more interesting. More fan bases are keeping an eye. But I have talked to a couple of people that that have worked with the Reds in the past or work there now that have brought up, like, yes, it increases the chances you make in the playoffs, but sometimes just because you're in position to make the playoffs, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily a good team, right? Like, so for instance, there's a lot of we've talked about how bad the National League is. A bad team's going to make the playoffs. I remember when LeBron was dominating in the NBA playoffs for that decade, 9 straight NBA finals. And there was even one point where, they would run into the Boston Celtics early on with Tatum and Brown, like when they were the first, second year in the league. And I'm like, well, the Celtics are technically in the Eastern Conference Finals, but like no one looks at them as an actual finals representative of the Eastern Conference. That's how bad it was. That's how bad the East was, right? But like, hey, you're there. Right? Like teams well under 500 in the NBA make the playoffs all the time. So you're there. But there are some baseball execs that are not fans of it because of the fact that sometimes it gives off the illusion that you're a lot further along in your progression than what you actually are. So when the fans get mad at the front office for standing still at the trade deadline, it's like, what are you doing? You're in the playoff hunt and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, mathematically we're in the playoff hunt, but when you look at the structure of the roster, we're not really a playoff team technically. Like we don't have the guns to go to war, if you will, with the elite teams in baseball, this, that, and the other. So I've always found that part interesting. But from a fan perspective, yes, like the Reds are in the hunt. We're in the hunt. We're right there. Half game, 1 game out.
1 game out
now. But yeah, the series is important with the Pirates because I started looking like go back to 2021. The records are the Reds' record against the NL Central 100 and 120. That is their record against the Central, right? Now, the Cubs it's wild to me that is the only team that they are above 500 against in the Central in that time. 31 and 27.
I would have even guessed it was higher than that. And anecdotally, I think we kill the Cubs.
Yeah,
and maybe it's because we're so bad against everyone else in the division.
Yeah, and then so the Cardinals, they're 24 and 30. The Brewers, they're 20 and 37. And the Pirates are 25 and the Reds are 25 and 26 against them since 2021. Wow. I chose that year because that's the year that they started to blow it all up as far as that goes. But the Brewers, interestingly enough, I'm used to, and I think you're conditioned enough as well. When you look at the Reds, oh, it's the Cubs. Oh, it's the Cardinals. I don't think this young roster anymore. I don't think they, even though the record shows that they're below 500 against those teams, they're 31 and 27 against the Cubs in that range. But like the Cardinals, I don't think they're afraid of the Cardinals. I don't think they're intimidated by the Cubs. I mean, they just went to Wrigley and took 2 or 3 from them a couple weeks ago, and then they take 3 or 4 against the Cubs at Great American. I don't think they fear the Cubs anymore. I don't think the Cubs have that aura to them that those early 2010s Reds teams just feared them, right? Same thing with the Cardinals. And the Pirates, I just think that's one of those it's hard to get motivated to play. I don't know. But the Brewers, that's that dominant team now. That's that team that the Reds find ways to lose against. That's what made that game 1 against the Brewers so fun. Which, by the way, okay, to take my Reds cap off.
Found as many ways to lose that game as possible.
Yeah. Who had the game tying run or the game winning run for the Reds? No.
The throw on Friday night?
Sorry, hold on. When the catcher, he put his arm out and pushed him away. Like, how did he not get called for that? Like, I know the glove, he slid right into the glove, so he got called out. And the Reds were able to hold on to the lead, and that's great. But that was one of the worst-looking saves ever. My goodness, that was brutal. I know pitching was a point of conversation for you guys. I know you called out David Bell. You can't do that around our guy Elly. He ain't going to let that happen. But when he put the glove out, he slid into it. But his offhand, he kind of pushed him out as well. I just don't get how the Reds got away with that, but it don't matter.
If the catcher has the ball, you're allowed to block the plate. So as long as the ball
was... With your hand, you could push him out? Oh, okay. Learned something today. Look at you, Jacob.
The one thing, I guess, to go back to the Reds, it's like you win 1 game of a 3-game series, the one game that you decidedly played the worst in. I mean, you could easily flip a couple things and the Reds get swept in Milwaukee, or you flip a couple things the other way and the Reds sweep in Milwaukee. So I think that just goes back to how close this team is. The losses in May just felt like they were, mountains to climb over to get back to competitive baseball. And now you lose games and it still feels competitive. So, that is an aspect to it. And another thing, going back to the playoff expansion, adding a 3rd wildcard team, the 3rd wildcard team last year and the year before in the National League won the pennant.
Fair.
So, the Diamondbacks snuck in last year. Everyone thought they were an afterthought at this point in the season. They made it to the World Series. Obviously didn't get over the hump against the Rangers. But same thing with the Phillies. They fire their manager when they're about 10 games below 500, and they end up clawing back to that 3rd wildcard spot, winning the pennant the year before. So, though it might not seem like you're as close as you are if you're in that next mix, we've seen that 3rd team that gets into the playoff can make some noise if they have, a roster to do so. Obviously, the Phillies, not a normal third wildcard team with guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, but, I digress.
Again, right now, the Reds, Pirates coming up later on tonight. Paul Skenes, Reds to get their first chance at seeing him here this season. And, again, Skenes been one of the most talked about pitchers out there. No doubt about it. The Pirates seem to have that piece down pat pretty good, so that's pretty good for them.
Their rotation is just ridiculous. Skenes, Jarrett Jones, Mitch Keller on your third day. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And that's why you look at the National League Central, the Cubs and the Pirates are favored to finish with better records than the Reds. And it's strictly because of their pitching rotation. We talk about how good the Reds pitching rotation is with Green, Abbott, Lodolo, Montas, pitching pretty well on most outings. But when you go to Chicago, they I think lead the league in starting pitcher ERA. I mean, Shohei Managa's been incredible. He's probably going to win Rookie of the Year. Then you have guys like Justin Steele who's regressed a little bit from last year, but he's been great. And then we just talked about what they have in Pittsburgh, and with how we know the Reds lineup can get into those valleys as well as the peaks, like we talk about all the time. They're a little less consistent on the mound as these other teams are, at least on the front end of their rotation, and that's why you see those other teams be favored to have a better chance at making the playoffs, better chance at finishing second, like we talked about with Casey in the National League Central. But the Reds' peaks are so much higher offensively than those other teams. It's just, can you find that when it matters? So
it's really going to come down to at the deadline, especially if the Reds stay healthy. Of course, that's always the big key in anything. Deadline talk will pick up as we get closer. I'm still not sold that the Reds are going to make a move at the deadline. I know that sounds wild. It's just they didn't do it last year, and they were in the same spot that they are this year, right in the middle of things, right? That's going to be the interesting thing. I know Noelvi Martes actually has pretty good games, over in Louisville. But I don't think offense is the number one concern for this team. It's going to come down to pitching. And are the Reds willing to part ways with prospects to get pitching? And are they will? I mean, let's be clear. And you brought up those good points too. The quality of pitching that's in the NL Central. You can go get another good arm, but to compete with those teams, to give you that big name, to complement the likes of Odolo and Green, are they going to pull the trigger on that? I doubt it. I doubt it. But we'll see. Again, the big thing for them: keep winning divisional games. Keep winning divisional games. That's why you guys talked about it. This Pirates series is very important. I know everyone wants them to get back in the hunt. Look, they won. I mean, they 6.5 back of the division when they started the series with the Brewers, and now they're 8 games back, and they even won a game in there. These divisional games could be brutal. They can help you out a ton, but they could bury you pretty quickly.
Right.
I think it's going to be a wild card race. We could talk about how they stack up against the Cubs and Brewers and all this. I think you got to start looking at the Diamondbacks and some of the other teams in the wild card. Unfortunately, at this point, even though they were one of the favorites to win the division coming into the year.
As we wrap up the show, another nugget.
You tired, dude? You tired? 4 hours?
No,
3 hours?
I'm good to go. Just looking at the clock.
I hit the road. I'm with you. Keep going.
As we wrap up the show, another nugget of breaking news before we log off. I don't know if you're a UFC guy, but I am. And Israel Adesanya is back for the first time in 2 years. He's fighting Dricus du Plessis at UFC 305 for the middleweight belt. That's a really, really big deal.
What did you do to see who?
Israel Adesanya against Dricus du Plessis.
Like ABC?
Easy as 1, 2, 3. And that's usually what happens when Israel Adesanya steps in the ring. So excited to see him back fighting, obviously with McGregor and Hamza pulling out in the last couple days. UFC's taken a big hit to their marquee fights, but 305 was one of the least exciting cards of the year, and now we get a big time headline fight. So big news for the UFC, big news for everyone else.
It was also taking a hit even when McGregor was expected to fight. It was kind of wild. They were moving down the card, right? Weren't they expected to headline that? And
they were always going to headline it, but he ended up pulling out with an injury.
But he got hurt during the training, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, cool. All right. Well, that wraps it up for us. This is the first full official week of Grip It and Rip It. Jacob Tissett, of course, going to be pulling double duty a lot for the next couple of months. And
wouldn't want anything different.
Technically, you were hoping that you're working double duty well into October.
That's the plan,
right?
That's the plan.
If that's the case, if Jacob's just putting all his focus on Grip It and Rip It by the end of September, that could be
we got a problem.
Or not. It's all Bengals.
Or not.
NFL from there. Nonetheless, college football, that fun stuff. But that wraps it up for us. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Grip It and Rip It every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Grip It and Rip It presented by, we're trying. We're finding somebody. We're working on it, right? But nonetheless, of course, members-only content to keep an eye out for. And then, of course, Off the Bench, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, repurposed and re-aired in Dayton on 1410 ESPN Radio, which, of course, is what I'm going back to Dayton to do right now. So I'm hitting the road. Kenner and Kev coming up at 3 o'clock. Hopefully, traffic lets me get there in time. What happens if I suddenly start running into traffic consistently? First hour of the show will be here in studio. Second hour is me in the car, just holding up my phone.
We go 50-50 Zoom call, Chatterbox Red style.
Exactly.
You're driving down the highway. That's got to be illegal, right? You can't text and drive. You definitely can't Zoom and drive.
I don't know. Well, no, you just put it up on the little
Oh,
sign.
yeah, I guess you're right. Hands free.
Yeah, hands free. Look, Ma, no hands. All right, thank you for tuning in. Until this Wednesday at noon, this has been Grip It and Rip It with Kenner and Tissett.